various destinations. Through the National Tourism Development Plan, or NTDP, the Philippines will develop clusters that are designed to encourage tourists to visit more destinations, increase their length of stay and expenditure. A convergence program will be pursued to link and promote stronger institutional partnerships among national, regional, and local tourism stakeholders. Airports, roads, seaports and travel facilitation, accommodation, attraction, standards and promotion, safety and security, cleanliness, training, legislation, and the culture of tourism. The cluster and convergence initiatives are envisioned to maximize efficiency and inclusiveness in the Philippine tourism programs. To disperse the growth of Philippine tourism, 20 tourism clusters comprised of 49 tourism development areas, or TDAs, will be developed in close cooperation with local government units and the private sector. Northern Philippines, Central Philippines, Southern Philippines. 9 clusters will serve as gateways to allow the smooth and efficient entry of foreign visitors to the various TDAs. Within the clusters, 2 strategic directions will be undertaken to rationalize and provide focus for tourism development, namely, improve competitiveness, pursue sustainability and inclusivity. Programs will be carried for each of the strategic directions, with key partners from national government agencies, foreign partners, local businesses, and the academe. On competitiveness, the intensification of transport and infrastructure development, pursuit of travel facilitation, attraction of investment and improvement of business environment, expansion of product development, design and implementation of an expanded marketing program, enhancement of HR capacity and improvement of service standards, on sustainability and inclusive growth, support of micro, small and medium enterprise development, promotion of gender and women empowerment, expansion and promotion of cultural offerings, preservation of the environment and promotion of climate change adaptation, implementation of risk and crisis management programs. The timely implementation of the programs will address infrastructure deficiencies, improve business climate, reduce costs in doing business, promote social equity, and enhance the cultural and natural environment.
I encourage everyone to help build a better future for Philippine tourism. Let us work together in shaping lives, creating jobs, and instilling pride of our culture and heritage.
Turismo, tao, trabaho.
Good morning and mabuhay, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to Day 3 of the 6th World Tourism Organization, UNWTO International Conference on Tourism Statistics. The conference program will now begin its 5th session. Our topic of discussion is on producing data on sustainable tourism. May we call on our moderator for the session, Mr. John Kester, Director of Statistics, Trends and Policy of the UNWTO, to begin our session.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today we are already coming to the end of this exciting conference. For this morning, we have scheduled 2 final sessions. One of it is on producing data on sustainable tourism in general, and one which specifically will address indicators for the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. In this first session, we will have a closer look into how to measure and what data sources to use. We will look into all sources of data, both traditional sources such as census, surveys and administrative data, but also innovative sources that have become available as a result of the digitalization of our life, often referred to as big data. One central paper and 5 short presentations followed by a discussion and Q&A will be part of this session. As organizers of the conference, we are very delighted to count on the presence of, from Luxembourg, Christophe de Munter, from Japan, Professor Akihito Saito, from Spain, both Ana Moniche and Immaculada Gallego, over there. From Indonesia, we do have Mr. Rifa Rufiadi. And from UK, we have Rochelle Turner. And from Hong Kong, but generally living in between airplanes, we do have Sarah Matthews. And Sarah will have to run off directly after this session. So in the Q&A, we will address the first question to you. As the closing ceremony is scheduled before lunch, this session is a short one, and we have to observe time very sharply. So with no further ado, I would like to hand the mic to Christophe to deliver the central paper. Christophe, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming early. I know it's the third day of the conference and people tend to relax a bit more and come a bit later, but so thanks for your quite large presence this early in the morning. The topic I agreed with the colleagues of WTO to talk about was to explain a bit what we have been exploring on big data at Eurostat, and we agreed to provide like a central paper on the topic. Apologies that the paper was released relatively late, only last week. The paper is quite comprehensive, so I hope you do have the time to look at it in the coming days or weeks. Here we only have like 8 to 10 minutes to quickly present a couple of things. I cannot go through all 25 pages of the paper, but I hope we can still like deliver a short snapshot and give some ideas that might also be relevant for the MST framework. So what are we going to cover? I will try to briefly explain a bit what big data is about, although we could have a whole conference only on this topic. I will try to do it in one slide. I will try to give an overview on the source, all these different new sources that might have a link to measuring tourism and possibly also sustainable tourism. Discussion we should not avoid, it's not only the benefits but also the risks of using this data and all the threats it puts on statistical systems. And then like, well, how will this, or how could this impact our daily lives as statisticians, people who measure tourism, sustainable tourism, how can this impact our lives concretely? As in many research topics, people have a number of P's or A's or whatever. In big data, there's articles with the 3 V's, the 5 V's, the 7 V's, and so on. I try to summarize it a little bit. The first V is about the volume, and this is also where the adjective big comes from. So it's about an exploding number of observations. It's an overload of information, which brings us to this velocity. It's like an avalanche of data coming to you, and you have to try to survive in this avalanche of data. There's also the variety of the data, and the data has many faces, and one of the issues which is also linked to the use of it is that the data is somehow organic. It's not designed to produce statistics as we have with the surveys or the census that John mentioned. It's data that is out there, and we have to see to what extent we can like transform it for our own needs. The veracity and the validity are the two topics that are extremely important for the statisticians, because we want to know what are we actually measuring with this data, because we might have billions of observations, but is that actually telling the story that we want to tell? And of course, also, especially in the context of official statistics, there's the issue of quality, representativeness, and so on. In terms of continuity, there's this volatility of the data. There might be a source today that is no longer there in a couple of years. Imagine you had built like a certain statistics on MySpace data. 5 years later, MySpace was more or less taken over by new players in the arena. So by the time you might have set up your methodology, one of the sources may be gone, or the access to the source may be ended. And a last one, which is the value. It's also relevant for us because we, as official statisticians, we no longer have like full control over the whole production chain. So we have to rely on cooperation with external parties, the ones who hold the data. So we have to find partnerships with them to access and use the data. But of course, they see data more and more as a valuable asset, even if data is not their main, like for Google, of course, data is what they are all about. For mobile network operators, data is a byproduct, but they start seeing it as a quite a valuable byproduct. So they are not really willing to give it away just like that. Now on the sources, there's many diagrams on sources of big data. This is the one we use at Eurostat. Like there's communication systems, there's data that is available on the World Wide Web. There's business generated data like the cashier data in supermarkets, the flight booking systems. There's sensors everywhere, the smart meters, traffic loops and so on. And there's also like crowdsourced data like the contents of Wikipedia pages. I will not go into detail of all of these things, but I will just try to give an example of many of those. You might notice this is a famous tourism place in Europe. It's like the central old square in Prague. You see lots of tourists, and we see there's probably somebody making a call who is like somewhere being observed and data is being stored. There's somebody switching on the smartphone, maybe, which means he's connecting to the antenna, to the GPS, and so on. There's somebody who found the place using the city map and the GPS. There's somebody updating his Facebook status by taking a picture of this. There's somebody looking up the Wikipedia information of the place where he actually is. There's somebody already Googling where he can go to a cafe after the ceremony of these puppets is done. There's somebody who booked his room in Prague through TripAdvisor, who's checking a hotel website on the establishment's website, not on the platform. Somebody else is boarding in for the return flight. Somebody just used his payment card in the nearby souvenir shop, and the payment card data, of course, also stored somewhere. Even the car that is parked there probably went through a few traffic loops to get there. There's somebody who stays in an apartment in Prague that has a smart meter, which means the occupancy can somehow be measured. And even the poor clock that has been hanging there for hundreds of years also has a Wikipedia page that people are consulting. So, and there's somebody in the corner, me then, who took the picture and added it to an album. So it's just this small shabnot saying like it's amazing how much data is being processed and stored and generated every single second. Online you find many of these diagrams like what is happening in an interminute or in an internet second, and it's quite impressive when you read these things of how many millions of hours of video are viewed every minute and so on. So it's a constant flow of data, and we have to see what we can do with it. Just because of all these different sources that can be used for tourism, we see that tourism statistics tends to be one of the statistical domains that is in the front line of this big data discussion in statistical offices. Now, just to jump to the benefits are quite easy and obvious. The risk, it's a bit more tricky. We expect better timeliness and maybe also overall quality. Very important for measuring sustainable tourism, it's the better geographical granularity, and I will show an example in the next slide. Now we often have national data on administrative regions, but tourism is often a destination level phenomenon, and especially the sustainable tourism or the possible pressure might be even very local within a destination. So here we hope that big data can be of a big help. We can also have better temporal granularity. Instead of having annual monthly data, we might have data for weekends, weekdays separately, for specific events, even for like crowd management by hour or per minute. Also important, we can have indicators that were previously not available. Like most of our statistical system is now designed with having surveys in mind. Many things are not possible. You cannot ask respondents. It's too complicated. It's too burdensome. This gives new possibilities, again, also for measuring sustainable tourism. And important in terms of internal organization of statistical offices. With one source, you can serve many domains. For instance, take the mobile phone data. It can be relevant for population migration, for balance of payment travel item, for tourism. And the other way around, one domain will not be based on one survey, but will be like a puzzle of different sources. And solving the puzzle is, of course, one of the challenges. Just an example of this geographical detail. This is the map of all the regions in Europe. We have about 240 administrative regions. And we can publish like accommodation data at region level. With using some more advanced geographical mapping techniques, we can go to like a lower administrative level. But with using like big data sources that are available, we can also like try to estimate the accommodation data on 10-kilometer grids. And again, when we think of measuring sustainable tourism, and also have in mind what Karel Obst said yesterday at the end of the day in his presentation about the importance of like not only the concepts and definitions of the MST, but also to find an agreement on what kind of geographical entities are we going to study. Because a destination, I mean, everybody in the room probably has a different opinion about what should be a destination. So if we know that we can go to these small grids, it might be easier to find a solution on how to define the areas. This was the good news, the benefits. Unfortunately, there's also risk and constraints. Those of you who have already explored big data probably saw that the first barrier is actually accessing the data. Or it's complicated, even if it's publicly available, it might be difficult to access and to manage the data flows. If the data is privately held or even by privately held companies, it's quite difficult to find partnerships to access data. You have to find somehow a win-win, that there's something in it for them, something for us statisticians. Again, we could go on for hours just talking about the access, but I will jump to the next one. Concepts and definitions, I mentioned it. This data is somehow organic and not designed for statistics, but we have to try to make something useful out of it. As compared to surveys where we design from the beginning to the end, the concept, the definition, the operational question, and so on. There's certainly a selectivity bias, and this is one of the key problems, and we also try to find methods to solve it. For instance, mobile phone data sounds attractive because there's lots and lots of data, but not everybody has a phone, which is maybe not a major problem because also not everybody answers surveys. So it's like a different type of non-response. But people might also use their phone differently in different situations. In particular, when traveling, people might switch it off because they think roaming charges will be quite expensive. So there might be some representativeness coverage issue there. Comparability over time, when you move from one survey to another, you have a break in series. Here's definitely when you move from one source to another source, you might also have a break in series. And also here I will show one example afterwards. And breaks in series, it's always a bit annoying for official statisticians because the time series is one of our like unique selling propositions to users as compared to ad hoc studies. Again, for official statistics, you have to rely on external sources, which might jeopardize the independence or the objectivity that usually characterizes official statistics. Also, internally in the organization, you need people with new skills, not survey statisticians, but people who can, like, instead of collecting data, rather connecting data, and it's a different skill. These people are also highly demanded on the markets, so you might have to compete with private companies to get these people. And finally, but also quite important, it's the trust. First, internally in the organization, you have to have a change mentality to move to these sources, and not always everybody is willing to go for this. You have to educate users about the usefulness of the new data, and also society, saying that, look, we do have some insights in what you are doing, but please don't see it as Big Brother. It's just a way of being more efficient with data. And all of this is definitely easier said than done. Now, just to give one example of this break-in series, we try to explore mobile phone data for Belgium. The blue graph gives the estimate of the number of trips, outbound trips from the mobile phone data. The red one gives the official data based on the survey, which means if Statistics Belgium would have jumped from survey data to mobile phone data, they would have had to explain like 100% growth just because of a change in source. This was very experimental data, so it was not, I mean, methodology, there's many things still to be improved, but still it gives an idea of how huge the breaks in series could be. Now, how can this help us or affect us in the coming years? I think most people who have started working with big data, they use it for auxiliary information or even to validate the traditional processes. to provide deeper breakdowns like the one I showed with the accommodation data. In the midterm, we expect that surveys will be one of the sources, and there will be an increasing importance of the new data sources. We already see some examples of flash estimates. I think Statistics Netherlands has already regular data on traffic and transport based on big data only. In the next phase, we think that the new sources will start replacing the surveys, but only partially, because just think of the tourism demand surveys. If you think of flows, well, there's many big data sources that can measure flows. There's also big data sources that can measure expenditure through credit card payments and so on, but you need to have the full picture. Also the purpose of the trip, the composition of the travel party and so on. So we will always need some kind of follow-up surveys as well. In the very long term, there might be a stage where we have to rethink the system entirely. As I said, we might be stuck in our mindset of surveys. So we might have the methods of the 80s and the 90s in mind and ignore the potential of the new data. Because one of the things I mentioned in the previous slide was the indicators that were previously not available. This is also the general thing. There's things that we couldn't measure before, and we should not see it as a handicap that we cannot reproduce what we were doing until now, but maybe we can produce something that is even far superior. But this needs a big mentality change for everybody in the chain. So where are we now? You probably all know this Gartner hype cycle. I think the peak of inflated expectations, we might have reached it already. So people start realizing that big data is not solving all the problems, and definitely not overnight, so that it's a bit more complicated than initially thought. It's also not as free as initially thought, because also using big data has a certain cost. I wouldn't say that we're still in the phase of disillusion, of hopelessness or whatever. I think we're reaching a level that people start seeing in a more, let's say, objective, realistic way what are the possibilities, and now we can start working on really finding solutions. Just to finish, a couple of ideas maybe also for the later discussion, or that can link to the next presentations. I think the big data is here to stay, so we cannot ignore it. If we do ignore it, others will just run over official statistics, and it's already happening. Official statistics has some kind of quality, but also and people mentioned it in the previous days, the time limits is sometimes a problem. So official statistics have no longer a monopoly on data. Others publish data and users use that data likewise. Somehow it's important to be in this train, because if we don't do it, others will do. And as I said, having objective data in a society, it's quite important for, let's say, the democratic process as a whole. I think statisticians have to be prepared to leave their comfort zone, their surveys. Instead of being a producer, they also become a user of sources. As I said, it's no longer designing the survey and being responsible of the whole production chain, but somehow you also become a user, and it's intermediate consumption of data. And as I said, we have to question everything we know and rethink the models and so on. Skills are important. Collaboration with other researchers, with those who hold the data, it's very important. And as I said, and as I try to outline in a couple of the slides, I think in this discussion of measuring sustainable tourism, big data could make a change because of this temporal detail, geographical granularity that was previously something that we could only dream about. This was what I was trying to say in 8 minutes. It was probably a bit longer. I hope you get a glimpse of what we wanted to say. And as I said, if you want to know more, please have a look at the paper which is available on the conference website. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Christophe, for your excellent opening. I trust you have clarified for our audience a number of opportunities and constraints that are connected with the use of big data, and it's really encouraging to see that Eurostat also is exploring possibilities that the big data offer. And I personally like the Gartner hype cycle very much, and not everybody might be already in the part where we are picking up on the opportunities of big data. I think there are still a number of people really at a peak with quite with expectations that might be a bit too high, and there might be also people that are in the throw and not really tapping into it sufficiently. Christophe, by the way, will assist me as moderator later on in the Q&A session. I would like to move on to our next presenter, Our next presenter will be Mr. Akihito Saito, Assistant Professor at Kyoto University, and he will brief us on a data infrastructure for data analytics platform. Aki, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, John. My name is Akihiro Sato from Kyoto University. I am also a PREST researcher of Japan Science and Technology Agency. Today, I'm talking about my experience to construct data infrastructure and data application funded by Japan Science and Technology Agency. This is the home message of my presentation. I would like to show the current situation. The world amount of data is increasing year by year. It is estimated about 4.4 zettabyte per year in 2013. And also it will be estimated, it will be reaching about 44 zettabyte per year by 2020. However, human cognitive capacity is still finite. It is estimated as 300 megabyte to 500 megabyte per life. Thus, there is an anomalous gap between big data and human cognitive capacity. This becomes one of dominant problems when we produce data and also when we consider the application of big data. As one of the solutions, I would like to propose data infrastructure based on world grid square statistics for data applications. This illustration shows a gap between available data and human cognitive capacity. In fact, it is estimated that the world amount of data created in 2020 will be 1 quadrillion times more than human cognitive capacity. Namely, the world amount of data will be 10 to the 15th power larger than human cognitive capacity. Human processing capacity is about 5 to 10 megabytes per year per person only. How do we reduce gap between the data and the human capacity? This is the main topics dealt in my presentation. One idea is to introduce much computation. In fact, I assume 3 data sources such as internet e-commerce sites, satellite imageries, and government statistics in my project. To reduce the amount of data, we need to consider information extraction. To do so, we need computational resources such as high-performance computers or supercomputers. And cloud computing resources is quite useful for this purpose. To organize data processing in computers across the globe, we need to observe statistical and IT standards. Of course, domain knowledge in tourism is quite useful to obtain insight from data and data analysis. Moreover, purposes are more important than other elements since we need to find adequate combinations among data and algorithm to calculate indicators from data. The purpose leads to a criteria to select data and algorithm which we can access. In the next slide, I would like to introduce one of the examples from accommodation survey in Japanese tourism statistics. The accommodation survey in Japanese tourism statistics is a monthly survey conducted by Japan Tourism Agency of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism. These data are collected from hotels, inns, and other private and public accommodations listed in the establishment framework database defined in Article 27 of the Japanese Statistics Act, which is managed by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. I created grid square statistics from survey microdata based on the Japanese industrial standard to define a grid square statistics called JIS X0410. We Japanese have more than 40 years history about grid square statistics as a part of government statistics. I attempted to calculate grid square statistics about tourism statistics from survey microdata based on Article 33 of the Japanese Statistics Act. We need 4 steps from the microdata, such as data validation, geocoding, encoding, and totaling. Finally, I obtained 1 kilometer grid square statistics about the monthly number of travelers and foreigners. These animations show the monthly number of domestic and inbound travelers for a period from 2013 to 2014. We understood Japanese travel tendency from a holistic point of view. Recently, I proposed a novel standard, novel definition of World Grid Square Code having a compatibility to Japanese industrial standard. Next slide, I will show you the brief definition of the World Grid Square Code. These equations show a definition of the third level of grid square code. The World Grid Square coding system consists of 6 levels of layers, as well as Japanese industrial standard, according to its spatial resolution. Each grid square in each level can be expressed by a decimal numeric digit. I have released document, data, and libraries from a project website called Research Institute for World Grid Squares. You can get more information about the World Grid Square coding system from http://www.fttsus.jp/worldgrid. Please visit it and join our activities. These maps show examples of third levels of grid square data about administrative area and elevations in Philippines. The elevation of the World Grid Square data is calculated from satellite data provided by Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA. As an application, I'm developing a multi-language data analytic platform called MeshStat. Currently, 9 languages are supported in the system. This is a conceptual illustration of the proposed system. There are 3 types of databases from government statistics, aerospace agencies, and internet sites. By combining different data from different sources, users can see tourism activities, probably for sustainable tourism for development, and grid square statistics about job advertisement and the number of workers, which is provided from Japanese government statistics bureau. The development of the function is based on PDCA cycle, consisting of data acquisition, data collection, data analysis, data visualization, interpretation, and development. This procedure is quite useful for capacity building among data producers and data users. This graph shows time series of daily accommodation occupancy ratio in Kyoto for January to April in 2017. These two panels also show the number of job advertisements and the number of workers in each 1 kilometer grid. I'm providing other functions through the website. If you have interest in this platform, please register it. And I need your assistance to develop grid square statistics worldwide. That is the end of my talk. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saito. That was dazzling to see the gap between the data available and what our mind can process. And in actually fear with a conference like this, that my hard disk will be full anytime soon. But we need to find a way out of that. I would like to go on to our next presentation, and it's from Spain. And as you know, from Spain, all good things comes in two. We do have here Ana Moniche and Immaculado Gallego. Anna will deliver the presentation, but both will be available for the Q&A later. And they are coming from the regional government of Andalusia, which is in the south of Spain, and they also represent Nextur, the Association of European Regions. And the presentation will be on data on sustainable tourism, the subnational European experience. Please, Anna.
Good morning to you all. First of all, I would like to thank the Department of Tourism in Philippines for the warm hospitality and the efficient organization of this event. I would also like to thank the UNWTO for inviting us here, myself and my colleague Immaculada Gallego, to present our experience on data and sustainable tourism. This experience on sustainable tourism is going to be focused on three of our experiences. The first one is the indicator system for measurement of sustainable development tourism in Andalusia. This is a system of indicators that has been conceived within the planning framework of our region. Is therefore conceived as a system of monitoring and follow-up of our actions in the policy making. This is a system of 348 indicators, which is comprises in 7 dimensions of sustainability, as we understand it in our region. And of course, all these 348 indicators are not all produced using tourist information, but we integrated also information coming from other sectors. The good news is that for this system of indicators, we didn't have to produce all the information, and we use already existing statistics for almost all the indicators. And specifically, we use almost 70% of the indicators, we use official statistics. Therefore, this could be like a showcase for an integration of different data for measuring sustainable tourism, not only from the tourism sector, but from other sectors using existing statistics. The second experience is the European project UNWTO Plus. This is an Interreg project where Andalusia is participating with 9 different other partners from Europe. We have partners from other countries in Europe, from Cyprus, from Italy, from France, and from Croatia, among others. This is an example of how a common framework can be used for measuring sustainability throughout different countries in an European framework, and this is specifically designed for measuring sustainability at local destination level. Among other aspects, this European project is testing 35 indicators in these local destinations for measuring sustainability, not only using data on tourism, but integrating data from other sources as well. And the aim of this system of indicators is not just measuring, but to integrate this knowledge in the policy action at the local level, the regional level, the national level, and at the European level as well. The third experience is the experience of Next Tour. As John Kester has said, this is the network of European regions for sustainable and competitive tourism. This network is comprised by 33 strong touristic regions in Europe competent in tourism. Therefore, these 33 regions use statistics and indicators for the policy actions. Within this network, we have run a consultation among our members, and we have identified all those aspects from the statistical system that are not developed enough in order to match the policy priorities in our region. We ask our members their need or information, and we found out, among other conclusions, these three priorities. The first one is the need for methodologies and guidelines for measuring tourism environmental sustainability. This implies not only measuring tourism, but also integrating relationship with other sectors, like the environment and the culture. And we understand this like an endorsement of the work carried out by Measuring Sustainable Tourism Initiative carried out by the UN Statistical Division and the UNWTO. The second conclusion from our consultation is the need for integration of other sectors' statistics. This includes also big data for measuring seasonality, which is a big issue in our regions in Europe. And the third one is the need for measuring residents' attitudes, which is, as my colleague from Flanders presented yesterday, this is one also of the priorities at the European tourist destination. Therefore, just to conclude with some main ideas, I would like just to propose another title for this session, if you allow me. I would like not to say that we need to produce data on sustainable tourism. We need to produce data on tourism that are comparable with other sectors. By this, I mean we need to follow guidelines and methodology commonly accepted by all the destinations, and we need to make ourselves comparable with other sectors. And we need to integrate data on sustainable tourism coming from other sectors. Therefore, we need to work with them, and this also will imply the integration of big data for measuring sustainable tourism. With respect of big data, I should say that we don't need to produce big data. We need to, at the moment, we need to learn how to use big data for measuring sustainable tourism, and we need also to work with the private stakeholders, because mostly they are the owners of the data. We acknowledge the importance of online travel agency, booking platforms, the so-called collaborative economy. This all they generate lots of data, big data, and we need to find a model of engagement with the owners of the data. In the same way that official statistics have been able to create this model of engagement with traditional statistics, we need to find a way also to work together for measuring sustainable tourism. From Andalusia, just let me advance you a very incipient experience, which is the measurement of sentiment analysis with an experience that is going to be called Andalusia Smart Data. In this experience, we are doing semantic analysis for management purposes at the local level and at the regional level, and also this information is going to be useful for SMEs and the private sectors. In this way, this experience, I mean, it's just, we haven't presented any data yet. We are designing this experience, and this could be integrated for measuring sustainable tourism and for measuring perception of our tourist destination. So this is my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I think some very interesting proposal, and I hope that we will have some time to discuss on that further. I would like to move on quickly with an example from Indonesia about the use of global data, on mobile positioning data for complementing data on arrivals to Indonesia. And I invite Mr. Rifa Rufiadi, Deputy Director of Tourism Statistics at the Statistics Indonesia, to deliver his presentation.
Okay.
Floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, John. This morning, I would like to share with all of you about Indonesian experience using mobile posting data for tourism statistics. In Indonesia, we use immigration data as main source for tourism statistics. However, we get difficulty to get data, especially from the border area. So we receive the data from border area not complete because the geographical difficulties. So our tourism statistic has been underestimated due to incomplete coverage. To solve this problem, we got the Ponsel data from operator, from the Ponsel operator, especially in border area. As you can see in dot red, it shows that there are foreign Ponsel sign in border. So the question is, are they tourists, or how we convert from Ponsel data become a tourist data? So this is our experience. We went to the border and we check people who bring the Ponsel, and we ask them, and then we get the formula 720, which means if the Ponsel stay in that area 2 up to 7 days continuously, then we consider it as tourists. Or they stay on and off, but the total stay less than 20, also we consider it as tourists. But we found another problem, that's not all border crossers use Ponsel. So we are not very happy with this formula. And then if you can see in the graph, this is the result from this using mobile data. The blue one is the mobile data, and then the red one is the data from immigration. After we use this formula, we get the green one. That is the tourist data to be added to the immigration data. So because we are not satisfied with this formula, now we are conducting another survey, funding by Minister of Tourism. Now we are doing this survey. Hopefully in next September, October, we'll get the result to resolve this under coverage data, and we will try the application, the formula for new formula, which is using MPD and combined with the immigration data and the people who using Ponsel. So this is our experience. Hopefully it's useful for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rufiadi. I think this is an excellent example of the combination of different data sources and showing really clearly where one source can complement the other source, and also some of the smart thinking that needs to be done in order to make this happen. Because we come along quite a number of problems, but those problems can be solved. Our next speaker is Rochelle Turner, from the Research Director of the WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, and she will update us on tracking global progress towards sustainable tourism development. Rochelle, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you, John. Thank you, UNWTO and the Ministry of Tourism for the Philippines. And I'd also like to thank the translators, who I think are doing an amazing job here today. WTTC is a member organization, for those of you who don't know, and we were set up over 26 years ago to advocate on behalf of the private sector for the enormous contribution that travel and tourism makes to the global economy. We conduct an economic analysis of tourism based on the TSA methodology, and we do this for 185 countries in 24 regions of the world, and collect data on GDP, employment, government contribution, exports, and investment. And this is where we get the totals, like travel and tourism contributes 10.2% of global GDP to the global economy, that 1 in 10 jobs on the planet are supported by travel and tourism. Visitor exports worth 6.6% of total exports. And travel and tourism is growing at an average annual rate over the next 10 years of about 4%. But something happened, and in 2015, we saw the change, and that people like me, who are always asking the next question, well, 10.2% of global GDP, so what does that mean for countries of low income? What does that mean for small island development states? 1 in 10 global jobs, well, what does that mean for women employment or youth employment? And asking that next question. So I come today as a messenger of an initiative that was set up by very clever academics at the University of Griffith in Australia and the University of Surrey in the UK. And together with Amadeus, with EarthCheck, with Greenview, the International Tourism Partnership, PATA, and the World Travel Agents Association Alliance, WTTC contributes data to try and tell that bigger story at the global level, to use that in the advocacy messaging of why travel and tourism is important and how we're making that contribution at the highest level. So we're trying to track global progress towards sustainable development. This is not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, and it's an iterative process using data as it becomes available. And it's being designed to complement the many great efforts that we've heard over the last few days to promote and track and measure sustainable tourism development. The indicator selection was based on and informed by the UN SDGs, but not exclusively. And the indicators are mostly derived from existing data sources, drawing on big data, being globally relevant, and being defensible and easy to access. So an example of this is data that WTTC contributes, looking at the economic impact to lesser developed countries and small island development states. And the website that's available for this is all open source, and it's all available And you can see the tracker across the bottom that looks at the moment at the 2016 impact, but goes back over 20 years to see how the contribution has changed over the years. And it does this for an increasingly growing number of issues. Looking at poverty alleviation, as I've just shown you. Looking at the equality and the concentration of tourism. Which countries benefit most? The top 10 outbound countries, 56% of expenditure, and the top 10 destination countries receive 48% of global expenditure. But 7 out of 10 of those top 10 countries in both outbound and inbound are the same countries. They're just swapping their residents from place to place. The dashboard looks at carbon and sustainable production and consumption, resource efficiency, at the moment on carbon for airline and passenger aviation thanks to Amadeus, but it's going to be incorporating, as you can see in the orange, emissions from cruise ships, emissions from the global travel industry, the hotel industry, sorry, and from convention centers. On sustainable production, it takes the data on hotel use of water and waste and how that consumption has changed over time with the EarthCheck and ITP data. It also looks at protected areas, and research specifically done by Susanna Becken and her team at Griffith University has looked at all natural and mixed World Heritage areas and found that only 30% have extensive planning programs for travel and tourism. So they've mapped this around the world and where those are and where those planning platforms are needed. The dashboard looks at gender, female employment, and number of female workers that are managers within travel and tourism. Again, building on the data at the bigger level and using the proxy of the GRI, in this case, for the information. We don't all have the Eurostat data is just not available all around the world, so we have to use these proxies. And security, and you can see some of the data there, which will include terrorism attacks from the World Terrorism Database, just showing the likelihood of tourism as a terrorist attacking tourists being so infinitely small compared to the impact of number of tourists overall. And a number of increased areas of development. And one of the big ones is incorporating data from the Nature Conservancy on their Mapping Ocean Wealth project. Now, this has just won a WTTC Tourism for Tomorrow award, where they have mapped all of the world's coral reefs and have been able to give an economic value to these world coral reefs, every single one of them around the world. And this data will be incorporated into the dashboard in the foreseeable future. So I come to say, as a messenger of this approach, as a supporter of the initiative, as WTTC will be using this data to help tell the stories and to continue to advocate of the importance of tourism and telling that bigger picture at the global level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rochelle, for your very rich presentation, and it's definitely something we will have a closer look into in the way you have put your dashboard together. I now want to move on to Sarah Matthews. She is Head of Destination Marketing APAC at TripAdvisor, and she recently has been elected chairperson of PATA, the Pacific Asian Travel Association. And Sarah will talk about TripAdvisor as a data source. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mabuhay. I'm going to move away from the podium and talk to you guys. You all know TripAdvisor. Everybody's an avid user. Hopefully you all booked your trip to the beautiful city of Manila using TripAdvisor. So I'm here to talk a little bit about how users are really using and providing us with that data. To put it into a bit of context, let me give you our latest statistics and why we have this information and how we can look at what travelers are doing and how they're planning. Hope you don't mind me standing in front of you and walking up and down. But essentially what we know is that TripAdvisor keeps growing month on month, year on year. We have 390 million users coming to TripAdvisor every month. Now, amazingly, every single one is a traveler because they're searching, planning, reviewing their travel. Shouldn't be coming on a TripAdvisor buying a vacuum cleaner. It's the wrong site. But most importantly, what are they doing when they're on TripAdvisor? Well, they're searching, but what are they doing? They're sharing. They're providing relevant content about their travel experiences, which brings us to where we're at with reviews and opinions. We have 500 million reviews and opinions on TripAdvisor. So travelers, what they're doing is when they're going on holiday, they're sharing their experiences, both in destination, pre and post as well. So when we look at that, what are we looking at from a data point? And I'm not a statistician, because I can't even say it, a statistician. But essentially, what are we looking at and how does that impact? Well, we have 290 user contributions per minute, right? So when we think about engagement, think about content and data points coming to TripAdvisor, that's 290 per minute. So it's a huge amount of volume of information that essentially travelers are producing for us. My role at TripAdvisor, to put it into a little bit more context, is I work specifically with governments. And what we look at a lot of the time is data. We believe at TripAdvisor anything worth doing is worth measuring. So when we look at the data with destinations, what are we looking at? We're looking at traveler trends. We look at the base information, male, female. But from a government point of view, does it really matter if it's male or female who are coming to the destination to travel? We just want more people coming. So what are we then looking at? We're looking at intent of travel, right? How I travel with different people will change my determination on how I travel. If I'm traveling for work, I have specific requirements. If I'm traveling with friends, I have a different set of requirements. On top of that, I then have what I call my core things that I need when I travel, right? One of them being Wi-Fi. I really don't travel or stay at a hotel unless there's Wi-Fi. And if I'm looking at trips or tour operators, I'm more inclined to book tour operators that provide Wi-Fi. Those are my needs, all right? So when I'm looking at that, that's the kind of information that travelers are actually providing. Are they family? What are they planning to do? Is this going to be an adventure trip? And then most importantly, when are they planning? And what are they using in terms of their device? Are they pre-planning 6 months ahead if they're coming from the UK to the Philippines? And what device are they searching that content on? And then when they get to Manila, what are they doing? How are they utilizing and consuming further content? So all of these touch points give us where we're at with TripAdvisor. Now, what we know at the end of the day is travelers, and we all know this, is we travel because of the destination. We're interested in the experience that we're going to get when we come here, right? So when we look at that, ultimately travelers are consuming all of that content. When should I come? Why should I come? Then they're looking at what's going to help me in having the best trip, right? Should I plan? What hotel should I stay at? What attractions should I go to, right? I love history, so I'm more inclined to go to destinations where I can fulfill my need, right? We think about what they're going to do when they're in the destination. Are they going to look at attractions? And if so, what kind of attractions? And again, that will change subject to their intent of travel. And then when they're on the trip, and what research tells us is that when they're on the trip already, they're already planning their next holiday. And I don't need to tell you guys this, you all know this. This is what you do when you go on holiday. So I think it's important, and I think some of the stuff that I've heard this morning is that we need more tourism data. Well, I'm happy to say that TripAdvisor certainly has a wealth of that. So we're happy to share that with destinations in how to build out your information and build out your product, knowing where you should be putting more weight onto what experiences that travel want from your destination. But it does go back to one core issue, is how are you using that data? I think this is something I come across a lot, and more often than not, I hear about destinations now investing into DMPs, but the reality is, what are you going to do with that information is absolutely core. Are you going to evolve your product? Are you going to evolve your destinations? Are you going to disperse that travel? So those are important things to consider when you're looking at data. And how do you mine that data, and how do you really use that data? So for TripAdvisor, in terms of the sustainable behavior, one of the things we think is really important is travelers, right? We love travelers' reviews, and that's penultimate to our business and what we do on TripAdvisor. So we launched Green Leaders. For those of you who know us, you'll know that essentially it's for hotels in 66 countries across the world where they can really audit themselves. It's every 2 years, and travelers get to choose and review those hotels, right? They choose those hotels based on the sustainable practices. But 1 in 2 travelers worldwide prefer to go to an eco-friendly destination and an eco-friendly hotel when they're given that choice. So it's really important to get your destination telling those stories, if that's going to be your focus. So when we look at that, one of the impact on green leaders and eco-friendly information is that travelers tend to have, we see a higher rating on reviews for accommodations who have actually been given the Green Leaders badge. So again, it's important to make sure that you're telling that story and providing that information. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, I'm staying at this beautiful hotel in the Marriott, and I know that they have some policy, but some of it isn't obvious, and I'd love to be able to see more and do more. Right? For those of you who have ever been to WTM at Excel, Excel is a great example. A long time ago, they were already taking you around the convention center, showing you what they were doing in terms of their sustainable practices. So I thought I'd share with you the last 3 quotes I thought was kind of fun, is that users are really driving the conversation. And for those of you who use TripAdvisor, you'll see that TripAdvisor is constantly asking you as travelers to provide extra information. If you're looking at a museum, it will ask you, does this museum, does it have accessibility? Is it inclusive? Is it family friendly? So one of the things I love is that looking through the reviews on products, products that we have on TripAdvisor, what's interesting is what people are saying. And I think users are really driving that conversation in helping you choose what will suit you. So my favorite one is actually the second one. They recycle and even have a chandelier in the lobby made out of recycled bottles. Awesome property. Outstanding, very impressive with a proactive corporate agenda to recycle bathroom amenities and to give to underdeveloped nations. Ultimately, it's travelers who are providing this advice to other travelers. So for businesses out there, they need to make sure that they're telling that story. It's always a fantastic pleasure to be back in the Philippines. It's always more fun to be in the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Very impressive, as always. And it's a bit envious to sit on this crowdsourced big mountain of data. And I think a lot of people here really feel like, wow, I want to eat into that. I know you're living in the fast lane and you have your car running almost outside. We are now going to take some questions. I would like to organize, so I would like to take the first question for Sarah. But while we are organizing that, so somebody that has a question for Sarah, please come to a mic. While we are organizing, I would like to give 1 minute the floor to Immaculada, because that was a thing I forgot after the presentation of Anna. Immaculada, please.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español.
I'm going to be speaking in Spanish.
Solamente una pequeña
I just
breve intervención.
wanted to make a couple of short comments because I would like to wrap up the session by sharing with you the lessons that we have learned in Andalusia from the measurement and creation of our models for tourism sustainability. 4 short points for you only. First of all, we have learned that there is no ideal measurement model at all. The model itself is always going to depend really on what your aim is, what your territorial scope is, what your timeline is, and above all, we should never overlook the fact that we have to take into account the user profiles that we are aiming at. The better definition we have of those different factors, the better the model will be to measure sustainability. We have also learned that it is important not to duplicate our efforts because we have to take full advantage of all the data, the statistical information that already exists at a national level and a subnational level. In this respect, I would like to say how much we appreciate all of the data produced by the national statistical offices. First of all, the reason why I'm saying this is because of a cost issue. Why should I pay for something that somebody else is doing perfectly well? Secondly, they're important because we know these stats are prepared rigorously according to proper methodologies, and we know that they allow us to speak the same language. There's comparability in their findings, and often we can cut down the timeline for our projects. A lot of projects, a lot of models don't get anywhere because no one is able to keep them going for long enough. We're also very aware of the fact, this is another lesson for you, that it is inevitable that all of the aspects covered by a complex phenomenon like sustainability can be hard to measure only through secondary sources. In fact, those secondary sources may not even be able to reflect the characteristics of the destination themselves when we're talking about drilling down to the local level. Now, in those cases, yes, we do need to come up with our own statistics, but only when there is no alternative. And in that case, 2 premises for you, 2 things that are important. First of all, there must be a favorable linkage there between the cost of producing the information and the use you're going to make of that information. And if you are going to prepare statistics, you should always take as a reference international standards. And lastly, we've also learned that the success of the model really doesn't depend so much on how simple or how complex the model is itself, but it will also depend on whether we are able to adapt what we're doing to our final users. We need to be able to produce our findings in a user-friendly environment so that the users of the model do not need any additional information or any specific training to be able to use the findings of our models. Those 4 points, I would say, define the experience that we have had, and I've been delighted to be able to share them with you. I do hope that they will help you for your own products and destinations. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Inmaculada.
Creo que es un apunte muy importante. Estas lessons learned, as we say in English. As said, would like to take now some questions from the hall. If there are questions for Sarah, please voice them. What happens?
How about I tell you something instead?
Yeah.
Sorry, my Madonna mic's fallen off, so I have to be less Madonna now. So simply put, if you want to access data, for those of you who don't know, TripAdvisor produces a travel survey every year, sometimes twice a year, called Trip Barometer. Thank you. And so for those of you who would like to access this, it's absolutely free, and it's produced for most of the destinations around the world. Just go onto TripAdvisor, type in Trip Barometer, and Bob's your uncle. Thank you.
That's, I think, very helpful, and definitely we'll have a look at that. Thank you. There's a question over there,
Okay,
please.
good morning. I'm Henrik Casolio Estepona, an advocate of heritage and development. And I'm also a business consultant for environmental accounting and sustainable tourism and climate change. Thank you for the UNWTO for staging this conference. For me, this is a breakthrough, and for me, it's a new learning. The Philippines is a country that is always trapped in the middle. Then, before the great civilization of the Pax European versus emerging great power of Pax Americana. Now again, the Philippines is caught in the middle between the draconic wealthy China versus still the superpower America. My question is, do you think the UNWTO, through this measured sustainable tourism, can let us move forward and let us get out of this trapping?
Okay, thank you. Is there
another?
Ah.
Do you think, again, the UNWTO have a regulation and policies toward countries or subnational that is in transit, means a community categorized temporarily in the status of administrative, awaiting to be full autonomous? And the classic example of this is the Bangsamoro, our Mindanaoan brothers in the south of the Philippines, which is now having a conflict with our president, Rodrigo Duterte, or the Republic of the Philippines. On my personal level, do the UNWTO
Sorry,
have...
may I interrupt you? I do think this is not questions that are really addressed to the panel. If Sarah wants to... Oh, you're leaving? Sorry. Thank you very much. Please, question that our panelists can address.
my question is addressed to any one of them.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but you are asking, do you think UNWTO has to do... I can speak on behalf of UNWTO, my colleagues can speak on behalf of UNWTO, but our panelists speak on behalf of their own experiences. And I think the points you are raising are very important, but for our panel, it's a bit complicated to address that. And we have talked here about data sources and
okay.
the way how we measure...
I may accept the answer if whether my question is valid or not.
No, your questions bother, but I don't think they are in the proper place. And I'm happy to talk with you after the session, but I have here my panelists, and I would like to have my panelists addressing the questions that are related to the presentations they have been making. So please, if there is... Alex, please.
Good morning. Alex Rayner. I'm from Amadeus Travel Intelligence. I'd like to congratulate Indonesia for your innovation in using mobile positioning data. I think this is a really impressive achievement. And the key thing I'd like to highlight and the implication for measuring sustainable tourism, because I met some of the Indonesia delegates that are here last night. And Mr. Riffa, if you can maybe elaborate, I understand that you'll have data pretty much in real time for mobile positioning data. Now, the question I have is, in terms of measuring sustainable tourism, this brings about a key component, which is the speed. Because surveys, we know, take some time. The ability to have real-time data, is that a component that should be a part of measuring sustainable tourism? Having data which is quick, that you can act on quickly as a result. So I would appreciate some comments. And Christoph, I remember I met you in Prague when you launched the MPD a few years ago. So I know the EU has been very progressive in this area as well. I appreciate your comments and the vision where this is all going into the future, but speed is the key word, speed.
Thank you for your appreciation. We do have the real-time data, but we're not yet ready to use this, and in the future we are going to use not for border but also for national tourism inside the country. That's my comment. So.
If I can just add to this, well, first of all, congratulations for the presentation from my side as well, because I think part of the conference is about sharing experiences and like inspiring others, and every single example shows like what is the possibility, because my presentation was maybe more like theoretical with a few examples, but you showed like, well, this is how we put it in practice. Now to come to your question, I think it's a general thing that we should do something about timeliness, in particular in official statistics. I don't think that the sustainability topic changes this. I think, and I try to make this clear in my presentation, the biggest change is actually the geographical detail that we didn't have without these new sources. If it can also be faster, the better, but I think this applies to all statistics in general, not only to this measurement of sustainability. Actually, just jump to one example I showed the difference between the mobile phone data and the official statistics. Actually, one part of the explanation of the difference is the time. The mobile phone data was for 2016. The official statistics was for 2015. Why the two different reference years? Why mixing it up? The official statistics were not yet available when I wrote the paper. On the other hand, the mobile phone data was no longer available for 2015 because there's this data retention restrictions that they have to raise the data after 12 months. So just to show that actually the mobile phone data was too timely to compare with the official statistics.
No, sorry. Thank you very much. I just, if I'm allowed as moderator also to add one little comment. I do think I really was impressed by the example of Indonesia when I saw it. And it's also a good example of collaboration in this field, because some of the earliest experiences with the use of mobile data have been done in Estonia. And actually, you have been collaborating with them, as far as I know, on developing what you have been doing in Indonesia. And I do think we need to have that development. It doesn't make sense everybody to invent the wheel, him or herself. It really makes we can progress much better and much faster if we really tap into the common experience. And we also should crowdsource a little bit in this respect. I'm going to take one last question over there, because I do see people becoming a little bit nervous and would like to go to the coffee break. So please, your question.
I'm Aura Chatling, people from the Thailand Convention and Exhibition Center. Actually, I'm very interesting for the way that you use the mobile phone data, but that one might be related to the data privacy concern because it's specific to the person. So how do you dealing with the issue of data privacy? Thank you.
So, yeah, it's the data is highly secret, yeah, highly. So we don't get the number. From the operator, we don't get the number of phone cell. We only get the say it's the number. We don't have the number of the phone cell number. The operator only give us the data, but they hide this number. So we don't know who is the tourist.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to add to that Indonesia, the minister, I think, happened to be connected with the telecom in the past. So that does help. But it's good that it helps. I do think the question of privacy can be solved quite properly. You have to make the records anonymous. You might have to have a certain amount of aggregation, and then it can be dealt with. Well, the sad message is that we have come to a close to this. I have to close this panel because we have the other panel waiting, and I think we're also longing for a bit of coffee. I want to thank the panelists very much. I want to have a big applause for the panelists, please. And I do think this is certainly a topic which will keep returning in future, because it's really part of a big process that we are going through. And bit by bit, we need to learn how to get there and try to incorporate all those new sources. So thank you very much for your attention, and we will see you back in 10 minutes after the coffee break.
Thank you, Mr. Kester, and to all of our wonderful panelists for that very insightful discussion. A gentle reminder for all of our delegates who have borrowed the SI equipment. You are liable for the SI equipment, so please handle it with care. Now we would like to invite everyone for a quick coffee break before we proceed to the next session. Please be back at the conference hall after 15 minutes. Thank you. And for those of you who will be joining the Intramuros tour today, the time of departure has been moved from 2:40 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. Assembly time is at 2 o'clock at the lobby of Marriott Grand Ballroom. One more time, assembly time is going to be at 2 p.m. at the lobby of Marriott Grand Ballroom. This is to give time for those who would like to go shopping. And also, don't forget to bring your badges. We would also like to inform the UNSD participants that the assembly time for the technical visit at the Philippine Statistics Authority today is now happening at 2 p.m. Assembly time is at the lobby of the Marriott Grand Ballroom. Please don't forget to bring your badges. And for ease of transport, please accomplish a departure slips and submit it to the registration area. For delegates requiring a certificate of attendance, kindly claim it at the registration desk at 12:45 p.m. You can also claim flash drives with the conference presentations of the day over at the registration desk after lunch. Presentations are also available online at www.unwto.org. We are requesting our next set of panelists to please join us at the stage area. Once again, we are requesting our upcoming panelists or panelists to the next session to kindly proceed to the stage area. Thank you. And 5 minutes from now, our next session will begin. Once again, we will be starting our next session in 5 minutes. For those who will be joining the Intramuros tour today, the time of departure has been moved from 2:40 to 2:15 p.m. Assembly time is at 2 o'clock at the lobby of Marriott Grand Ballroom. This is to give time for those who would like to go shopping. And please don't forget to bring your badges. We also would like to inform the UNSD participants that the assembly time for the technical visit at the Philippine Statistics Authority today has been moved from 2:30 to 2 p.m. Assembly area is at the lobby of the Marriott Grand Ballroom. Also, don't forget to bring your badges for that one. And for ease of transport, please accomplish the departure slips and submit it to the registration area. And for delegates requiring a certificate of attendance, kindly claim them at the registration desk at 12:45 p.m. You may also claim flash drives with all the conference presentations of the day at the registration desk. Please claim it after the lunch hour. And don't forget to use our official hashtag, IY2017. Once again, that's hashtag IY2017. We are requesting our distinguished guests, excellencies, to kindly clear the front of the stage area. We are requesting our special guests, excellencies, ladies and gents, to kindly clear the front of the stage area. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are requesting our guests in front of the stage area to kindly please clear that area of our stage. Once again, guests who are in front of the stage area, we are requesting you guys to kindly clear that part of the stage right now. Thank you. We are requesting our next set of panelists to kindly proceed to the stage area right now. Requesting panelists for the next session, please join us at the stage area right now. Thank you. We are calling on the attention of our panelists for the next session. Calling on the attention of our panelists for the upcoming session. please proceed to the stage area. Once again, panelists, for our next session, kindly join us right now at the stage area. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now proceed with our 6th session. This session is on tourism indicators for monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals. May we now call our moderator, Mr. Sven Kalmans, Head of Section Environmental Economic Accounts and Sustainable Development Indicators, Federal Statistical Office of Germany, to begin our session.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction into this 6th session, Tourism Indicators for Monitoring the SDGs. And session 6 is the last regular session of this conference. And if you keep in mind the pyramid of information, we have on the bottom the statistics, in the middle the accounting, of which you've heard something during the recent days, as I assume. And now we've reached the top of the pyramid, the derived indicators. If I look a little bit tired, that might be because I just arrived this morning, coming directly from New York, from the UN Committee of Experts of Environmental Economic Accounting. You just heard I'm in charge of the SDG indicators on the one hand and on economic accounting on the other. And may I say that sustainable accounting for tourism was one topic we had during our meeting in New York that started on Monday and went until Wednesday, or if you go to Manila time, that would be Thursday morning Manila time. That's where I arrived just today. And I want to send you my greetings and say that you did brilliant work as UNWTO on developing a framework for measuring sustainable tourism. And if you need input from the environmental accounting side to see how SEA compliant your framework is, we offer our help to do this in the near future as soon as you proceed with your development. Now, tourism indicators for monitoring the SDGs. I have a wonderful panel here. I think it's a brilliant panel. I will introduce these persons step by step as soon as they will take the microphone. And we have a keynote that will be presented by Peter Leimer. He's, I would say, not one of the, but the expert when it comes to tourism statistics and accounting. And he wrote a brilliant, as I think, keynote paper, and that made me think about the SDG indicators we have and we are talking about now. Because on the one hand, he raises several different methodological questions, but on the other hand, I thought, is it really the right thing we are measuring? I mean, if you look at the target, they suggest measuring the amount of sustainable tourism, but can we as statisticians really measure the amount of sustainable tourism? Or are our frameworks in that kind that we only can measure the impact of tourism? So say if the tourism sector in total gets more and more sustainable or not, when looking at the different kind of impacts we do have there. And I think we hear a little bit more of this from Peter now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's working? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for having the possibility to speak a little bit about the SDGs indicators. I do not want to speak too much about this because I'm sure you read all my paper. So it's very important for me that I get some feedback from you concerning my proposal. So first of all, in my paper is divided into 3 parts. There are some preliminary parts, like this one showed here in this slide. What are the preconditions for tourism development? I think it's rather clear that high quality of the natural, social environment is one of the production factors for tourism. And there is a growing need recognizing that there is an impact on social, environmental, and ecological environment. But there is a lack of guidance how to monitor these processes. So therefore, it was clear that we need some indicators developed. And as you know, in 2015, by the UN, there were SDG indicators developed, or the goals, the 17 goals were developed. We have in total 169 targets and hundreds of indicators. And some of these indicators concern or there is mentioned tourism, and in fact these are 3 indicators where tourism is taken into account. Well, but beforehand, I would like to mention 3 challenges concerning the measurement of sustainable tourism. What is, I think, difficult is to find out what is tourism related, which kind of impacts are tourism related. This is one point. Of course, we need the regional aspect I mentioned yesterday, and what is important also to find out about the usability of the data. Here in this slide you see the indicators with direct link to tourism, and these are proposed by the interagency expert group. I'm sure we will hear more about Lisa afterwards, and some proposal also done by the UNWTO. And the red marked parts are those a little bit concerning, these are our concerns concerning the indicators. For example, sustainable tourism industries, what is the definition for this? Or what are tourism jobs? Or there another point, what is a sustainable tourism strategies? As you know, statisticians always want definitions, they always want classifications, and therefore concerning these items we have a little bit doubts about this. Well, I'm coming now to indicators proposed beyond these 3 indicators or these 3 targets. Here, end of poverty is one of the goals. The proposed indicators would be, of course, based on TSA, the direct value added of tourism, and of course also the persons employed in tourism industries. Another one is concerning education. Of course, tourism can improve education, and here are some proposed indicators: change in average skills, for example, of tourism workers, and the proportion of employed persons in tourism industries with school education compared to total population. Another one might be, and I think it's very crucial, this one, is the availability of water. You know, there are 2 aspects. On the one side, tourism can improve the infrastructure for tourism access, but on the other side, and I mentioned it also yesterday already, it's tourism and tourists, they cause a tremendous use of water, and don't forget it's also used by local people, it's also used by agriculture, to grow up the crops. So here are some indicators proposed: final water use according to tourism GDP, for example, share of treated water, wastewater from tourism businesses, for example, or the waste of water per visitors. This could be also compared to the waste of water of resident people. Well, here, reduce inequality within and among countries. I think there are, again, 2 aspects in tourism. They can increase inequality, but they can also decrease. So tourism can also decrease inequality, and there are some indicators proposed. For example, average earnings in tourism compared to national average would be one possibilities, or average income per person working in tourism industry compared to the rest of the economy. Well, I think this is also important. This one, the goal: protect, restore, promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. I think tourism has the possibility, opportunity to point out the importance of ecosystems. Yesterday, I think it was also mentioned, the national protected areas. I think this is a quite important issue. And here, some indicators are proposed: change in protected areas in tourism destinations, contribution of national parks to tourism GDP, and share of protected areas related to total area of a country. Goal 16 is promote peaceful, inclusive societies for sustainable development and levels. I think, in particular, in these times, I think this is a quite important goal. Here are some proposed indicators. For example, change in rates of crime in tourism destinations, number of offenses according to seasons, for example, or the rates of crime in tourism destinations compared to the ones in non-tourism regions. So these are some proposed indicators based on the 17th goal. If you want to have more information, please look into the paper. There are, for every goal, there are some indicators proposed. Summing up, again, I think it's clear, the first bullet point is clear, have a social, ecological, and economic impact tourism. Sustainability, and this was mentioned also yesterday in my session, that it's a regional phenomenon. What is also important, I think, sustainability cannot be measured by only one indicator. I know from the first day here on Wednesday, there was the wish to have one simple indicators which would be useful for the tourism policy and for the decision makers. But we have to be realistic. This is not really possible. We do our best, I have to say. Well, what is also important, it was also mentioned, we have to cooperate with different people, institutions, governmental, non-governmental organizations, even within statistics. Within TSA, we have close cooperation with the National Account Department, but now we have to extend this, of course, deeply to the environmental section. For example, in my case, in Statistics Austria, in my directorate, we have the environmental section, so it's easy to contact them. I think cooperation is very important. Data compilation is done in a consistent way. Well, that's one of the major rules we have in statistics in general. And building on indicators beyond, I think still a lot of work has to be done in this field. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Peter, for giving us this short outline of your paper. And I see that I have 4 panelists who are greedy in reacting on your short presentation. And the first one will be Lisa Bersales. It's the woman right to your left. And Lisa is wearing 3 hats today. I mean, on the one hand, she's from the Philippines, so she's our host today. And we'd like to thank her for this very nice conference. The second hat she's wearing is that she is chief statistician of the Philippines. So she will probably tell us something about their experience with measuring tourism and how to use data from tourism to derive indicators. And her third hat is that she is a co-chair of the interagency expert group who was in charge of developing or selecting these indicators. And I hope that she will tell us a little bit more about the process, how it went, why we see these indicators here, and which opportunities we have to adjust them in future to make them probably more relevant as they currently are. Please, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Sven, and thank you very much, Peter, for your suggestions. I would like to talk first as co-chair of the interagency and expert group on the indicators, SDG indicators framework, of which my good friend Sven is there as well. So we've been doing the work for 2 years. It subscribed to the principles, the guiding principles of Agenda 2030, which are country-led, leaving no one behind, participation from different stakeholders, statisticians, from government, from the country, from international partners, from private sector, from the civil society as well. The process was, it started 2 years ago, even before the approval of the Agenda 2030, where the UN Statistical Commission created 2 committees, actually. The one is the one that was tasked to come up with a global indicator framework, and the other is a high-level group which came out with the Cape Town Global Action Plan, which sets out the plan to be able to provide the data for the indicator framework that was developed by the expert group. So we had a number of meetings, face-to-face, WebEx, but we also included in the discussions the other stakeholders. It was very challenging. If I may share a very personal experience, when I was asked which of these two groups, the one tasked to develop the indicators, and the one to discuss high level how to be able to help the statistics community be data partners, I told myself, I'd rather go to the first one, which is to discuss indicators, because it's very technical. So I expected that it will be a group of statisticians in a closed setting discussing technical issues, but that did not happen. We're put in front of a big group, not just statisticians, not just technical issues, and thus it gave us the opportunity to start talking to other communities. And thus, what we were saying, statisticians or technical people should start talking to the policymakers, to the civil society, to private sector, trying to understand each other's languages. So, to cut the long story short, after much work, we are now at the stage where the UN ECOSOC, just on June 7, agreed to endorse the global indicator framework and the plan for revision, refinement to the General Assembly in September. So we look forward to the approval of that, so that indeed we have all the agreement, even from the political level, that we are going to use this global indicator framework, but that is not cast in stone. The indicators there, which are currently 232 unique indicators, are not the final ones, but we will continue to refine and modify given the experience that we have. So I'm very happy about the paper of Peter, because you are actually already starting the refinement and modification. And it is agreed by the expert group that let everyone develop and propose alternative indicators and show that they are workable, they can be measured, and they will be able to provide the information needed to monitor the achievement of the SDGs. So that is where we are in terms of the technical aspect. The 232 indicators are not cast in stone. They are actually not forced upon the nation. So you have to look at the global indicators and look at them in the context of your country. So in the Philippines, we are reviewing, we have actually already mapped these indicators with the existing results matrix of the Philippine Development Program or plan of the current administration. Also looking at ASEAN ambitions, aspirations, and even the sub-regional aspirations like the ASEAN and Asia-Pacific aspirations. So as to the statistical framework, so we have the list of indicators, very specific ones for the SDGs, but what we are discussing here is a statistical framework for measuring sustainable tourism, which is a systems approach, an integrated approach which will put together the three pillars of the SDGs, environment, economic, and social. And I'm eager for that to proceed, because the Philippines has already started. We have had our tourism satellite counts. We've been doing that, but we've already piloted the SIA framework, and so we have now minerals accounts. We have mangrove, and we're moving to water and other accounts as well. And so, as presented by Clara before, the statistical framework for measuring sustainable tourism will build on the tourism satellite counts and the SIA framework, and to achieve that systems approach. But still, we have to have those indicators generated in the current global list, as well as the ones that may be modifications or refinements. Some suggestions from Peter. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time for statisticians, because we are forced not to be just where we are, our comfort zone, but really to communicate to policymakers and other users of statistics, so that we indeed will produce data which are public good, the ones that will be used for the countries. If I may share with you now on the Philippines setting, I've already mentioned the Philippines has the tourism satellite accounts, and we're doing the framework, the SIA framework, to incorporate environment aspect. The challenge to us for the 230 unique global indicators is the leaving no one behind part. We have already mapped data availability for the global indicators with our own results matrix for the Philippine Development Plan. And we found that we have about 60% to 70% of these indicators already available and ready for use at the national and the Philippine regional level. But when we go down provincial and municipal level, and by different levels of disaggregation, by sex, by persons with disability, by women, they are not yet there. And so we have started looking at alternative sources of information. So we are now subscribing to the development of a data ecosystem at different levels, which would provide the data needed for monitoring SDGs and doing the SFMST. May I share with you that about 33% of the information will come from the census surveys of the Statistics Office, the Philippine Statistics Authority, but 70% will come from administrative data. And the rest, we hope, will come from other information like big data. And the good news for us is that we have created this big data task force here in the Philippines, which includes our two telecommunications, biggest telecommunications groups, SMART and Globe, with the National Privacy Commission. And our two telecommunications groups have committed to providing 6 to 10 indicators for monitoring tourism for free. I think I would like to underline for free. So we are subscribing to the model wherein we will not get data from them because of confidentiality and privacy. Instead, we will tell them, please generate for us this indicator, and they will do so. And it can be down to provincial and municipal level. So we are actually doing some pilots at the provincial level for developing this data ecosystem wherein we can provide data from our censuses, administrative, and then other data in Palawan, one of our famous tourist destinations. So we hope to be able to showcase soon whatever we have. And what are we trying to grab as opportunities here? This conference, may I say, is an opportunity for the Philippines because the enthusiasm has been generated. And so we would like to grab that opportunity and look into how we can really help in developing and finalizing the statistical framework for measuring sustainable tourism. And may I say this now back to my hat as expert group co-chair. When the expert group assigned certain indicators, global indicators, to what we call custodian agencies, among them is, of course, the WTO for the tourism indicators, we said that we will leave it up to the custodian agency how fast they will develop the indicators we referred to as Tier 3, the ones without any methodology nor data yet. And we will give them the challenge to show that the indicators they are developing are measurable, can be measured, can be generated. And so, as far as I know, the WTO is the first international agency that has this conference which focuses on tourism statistics, specifically sustainable tourism. And I feel that, therefore, this will become a standard maybe for other stakeholders who want to develop indicators for SDGs to pick up pace and to get the commitment of various stakeholders. Thank you so much for giving me the luxury of being the first to talk and react to Peter. Thank you, Sven.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much for giving us the insights of the interagency expert group, which are very unknown to most of the people outside of these groups. So it's, I think, very important that you communicate how the process worked and how different groups influenced the indicators we see. And in addition, how high the time pressure was we had to develop at least something we could present and then bring forward, but still having the opportunity to change it in future and make it better, make it more handleable and practicable. And again, thank you for giving us the insight on how you on the Philippines try to measure sustainable tourism. And I think that's an interesting thing when you look at the SDG indicators. You, on the one hand, have the global level, but then, of course, you have spatial reporting and national reporting, and these indicators could look very different from the indicators we have on global level. And that directly brings me to our next panelist, the enterprise level. We have here Max Verstraat from a well-known hotel branch. I would say if you ask people from my generation about the luxury hotel branch, they would come up with this name. I don't want to make commercial here, but probably everybody knows now who it is.
I will say it later, don't worry about it.
And I think he will tell us a little bit about how enterprises can contribute to the fulfillment of the SDGs on the one hand, and about their needs for indicators on the other hand. I mean, we see we have the global indicators, but are the indicators you need for your enterprise level similar? Do they have to be comparable? Or is it enough if you have different indicators you can use to monitor your sustainability needs in your enterprise? Max.
Thank you. Thank you, Sven, and thank you to the UNWTO for inviting us to be part of this this conversation and to represent, I guess, the private sector to some extent. I think it's a nice segue to be speaking after Lisa.
Yes.
You know, and thanks for the introduction, because I agree that, you know, this is very important to the private sector. It's very important that we're part of the conversation as well, that we're at the table for a couple of different reasons. And I'll get into how, you know, Hilton measures sustainability and give you some information on our company. But I think that as we look across our different stakeholders, be it investors, be it our own team members, our employees, our guests, like Sarah from TripAdvisor was mentioning, there's growing awareness and interest about what companies are doing, you know, to you know, engage with these goals, to you know, what's their progress against these goals and targets. So it's important that as a company, you know, we map our efforts against them, but it's also important that these targets and goals, you know, are valid and work for us, you know, because the private sector, I know our company, you know, we have access to a lot of data. You know, we have a lot of things going on, and we have really big access to data as well. So, you know, I think it can be leveraged on both sides of the conversation. The other thing is, to your point, Sven, you know, as our leaders in the company also become more aware and engage with these indicators, it's important that we're able to benchmark. You know, we can benchmark internally as a company through our own systems, and we do a lot of it. And you know, it's a very competitive industry, so our general managers are always comparing against you know, their other properties. But again, I think that as there's, you know, growing awareness of these targets, we want to be able to benchmark against other, you know, private other companies in the private sector as well. So, you know, again, I think that personally, Hilton, we started mapping against the goals. Last year in our latest report on our broader corporate social responsibility efforts, we're mapping everything against the SDGs. We're going through an exercise now where we're mapping all of our efforts against the targets, the specific targets and indicators. But as those get tweaked, modified, or created, if new ones are created, I think it's very important that the private sector be at the table, because they're only going to become more and more important. And I can move on to a little bit of information as a company, how we measure our hotel sustainability performance, and some of the data that we have access to, and happy then to answer any questions from the panel, from the audience as well. A little bit of information about Hilton. So we have 5,000 hotels in, I believe, the latest number is 105 countries. And the vast majority of these, about 85% of these hotels, are franchise operations, meaning we do not own or operate them. So we have limited control over the operations of those hotels. And I can talk about, in that scenario, how do we then make sure that across our portfolio of hotels, we're looking into these things. We service about 160 million guests every year, and we have 365,000 team members. We have a beautiful hotel here in Manila at the Conrad. Hopefully I'm not the only one staying there tonight. So sustainability is a business imperative, for us. And it's been for many years. I think that for the reasons I mentioned earlier, again, it's more and more important across our scope of stakeholders, whether it's our consumers, investors, our team members, our employees. Those people want to select a product, invest in a product, or select an employee who is doing the right things in these areas. And on top of that, as a company and being in the private sector, being a responsible operator has also a very positive impact on your bottom line. We've seen a lot of savings from, water, energy, waste efficiencies in our operations. These things really allow us to better perform as a company, and they also allow us to deliver on our mission to have a positive impact in the communities where we work, live, and travel. So we have a system called LightStay. It's a proprietary system which we started rolling out in 2009, and by end of 2010 was a brand standard across all of our hotels all over the world, meaning it's as important to us as making sure that you have the right mattress in that room, that you have the right bathroom amenities or those nice products at the breakfast buffet. So every single hotel is required and has been required now for many years to measure their energy consumption and their water consumption. Now, specific to those two data points, we do regression analysis, we do modeling for all the hotels so that the system will then compare actuals against forecast and can send alerts to the hotels when the consumption goes above a certain percentage of what the system is forecasting for that property, so that we can knock at the hotel's door and say, hey, why are you using so much water? And we look at variables such as weather and occupancy. The system connects to over 5,000 weather stations around the world. They're also required to measure their waste in two different ways. We ask them to measure their total waste outcome, how much waste they're generating, but also how they're managing that waste. So making sure that as much as possible they're diverting waste from landfill, and what are they recycling, how are they maybe repurposing some of that waste, donating and whatnot. And then, the system also looks across a series about 300 or so best practices from an operating perspective, but also from a building perspective. We look at LEED, EBOM, these types of things, and every hotel kind of like, measures against those best practices. And then finally, we look also across, we use this system to also measure social community outreach from all of our hotels. So our hotels on LightStay, we have data accessible to us around how much volunteering they're doing in their communities, how much soap they might be recycling, how much food donations they could be making, how many youth they've impacted in their community. We have a big goal as a company to connect, prepare, employ 1 million young people by 2019. So we use all of that data, we have access to in Lightstay. So, when we're sitting at a table and talking about, having the right indicators to measure sustainable tourism, we can really leverage, this intelligence that we have in our systems. Let's see, I think I touched on the items I wanted to talk about. Happy to, again, answer any more questions, provide more information.
Max, thank you. Thank you. I think you gave us a great insight in what you all do in the Hilton Group, and we all know that the Hilton is a special ambassador for the UN International Year for Sustainable Development, and I think that's what we expect from a special ambassador for sustainable development, that you do quite a lot in this area. I just want to come back to one of my parts of the question, the Sustainable Development Goal indicators that have been adopted on the global level. Which role do they play for your organization? Do you use the same indicators? Because I talked to some industries at home in Germany, and they told me, oh yes, there have been some indicators being suggested for the global level. We've looked at them. We can't use them as an enterprise. So if you use different indicators, how are they related to the SDGs? And do we have access to the results and the methods of these indicators? Briefly, please.
So some of the results from these indicators are public, and we're also always happy to partner with different sectors to provide additional information, provide kind of like an inside look into our systems and data. We've done so in the past with others, including ITP, for instance, Greenview, who were mentioned before by Rachel from WTTC. I think that you have to find the right balance between the two things. Myself being at the global headquarters, I want to be able to have global indicators that allow me to, not only benchmark, but also easily aggregate all of the data and be able to report out as a company. But at the same time, hearing, from our constituents in the region, oftentimes you'll get the same sort of comment, that this global indicator doesn't necessarily apply to me. It'd be better for me to be measuring these things, et cetera, et cetera. I think that I think that you need to be flexible and adapt. I think you have to find that nice balance between having really strong, the most important indicators being global, and then you can build on that. Have a couple additional indicators where it makes sense. Depending on whether it's the market or the country. I think different countries are going to be prone to different risks, whether they're environmental or social risks. So, and we do some of that for our properties, and I think that maybe in those situations it makes sense to have a couple additional indicators specific to a country or market.
Okay, thank you, Max. And I think the next panelist is already ready for his statement. It's Rafael Diaz de Medina, and he is Chief Statistician and Director of the Department of Statistics in the ILO, the International Labour Organization. And I talked to him before this panel, and I know that he has some remarks to Peter's paper, of course, and of course that he has a special interest in one of the SDG indicators because it's related to employment, and that's the indicator 8.9.
Yeah, thank you for this panel. I think it's, first of all, I am very honored to be sharing this panel with two members of the Interagency Expert Group on SDGs, because you yourself as well. And I am also would like to highlight the important role of Philippines on that through Lisa, who has conducted the Interagency Expert Group as a co-chair in a magnificent way. And we really, the country should be proud of her because she has been leading all us as an international community towards this international framework that she has mentioned about, it's about to be endorsed by not by a minor thing, but the UN General Assembly, which is, I think, one of the first occasions where statisticians are really at the top of the political level. So thank you very much, I think. And you have briefly told us about the process. I would be adding probably some key issues. And the other thing is that The paper that Peter has produced, I think, captures magnificently as well the essence of the core of the problems that we have in measuring sustainable tourism and the challenges that we have, not only for Goal 8. I would say that Goal 8 is the one that is focused on growth and decent work, and probably it's linked with more employment. But of course, tourism is going beyond that, and of course, it has implications in, I would say, many of the goals. You have tourist industries are one of the industries that have a lot of implications in agriculture, even construction. We have heard from the opening ceremony that Philippines is facing challenges and has started to develop infrastructure to cope with this. So it means that it's a creation of employment in infrastructure. It means construction, highways, tourist infrastructure is very, very kind of job creation, or job creative, I would say. So I think it's very important to highlight that the goals are kind of cross-cutting. Tourism industries are cross-cutting in their importance for job creation and for other things. Goal 10, Goal 1 for poverty alleviation, the caring for indigenous, for instance, for crafts, for manufacturing, for hotels and catering, and not only for the direct creation of employment, but also the spillovers that has in the whole economy and on the social ground. So I think, of course, we as ILO, we are very focused on that. We are very keen on establishing partnership for measuring better the different implications of employment and all the dimensions, not only the creation of employment itself, but also what type of employment we are creating, what is the implication for poverty alleviation, what are the implications for gender, what is the implication for youth, the different aspects of tourism itself. You know, the ILO is tripartite, so it means that we have the workers and the employers associations in our own constituency from, I would say, most of the countries in the world. And this is a unique opportunity where even at the tourist industries, working jointly with UNWTO, we have managed to create a good atmosphere of industrial relations and, of course, produce a lot of information for that. And these are the challenges that we have to better measure. Of course, the paper from Peter raised a lot of questions and even some issues in terms of measuring concrete indicators that had this interagency expert group driven by the member states and where the international system has contributed, even civil society, as very well as Lisa has very well told us. But I think of course, the challenges are there for the short term, probably, and the long term. For the short term, it's a concrete step. We need a global reporting system, and the global reporting system will be approved in September. And for this, the reporting will go on, and we will need to find the workarounds to see if now we don't have the concrete frameworks. But it's very explicit from this conference. We are going to have very soon a very interesting framework for measurement sustainable tourism. So probably one of the weak points that we have now, because the indicator that it has been selected for jobs creations in the tourist industries is mainly on sustainable tourism, and of course there are problems on how to define sustainable tourism and also jobs in sustainable jobs. So we have a lot of problems in numerators and denominator of the indicators. But this means that I think it's an encouraging activity that we have already addressed this. We have heard about green jobs. We have heard about MST framework. We do have invested a lot of satellite accounts. So there are a lot of emerging sources that the countries will start to produce very soon. Of course, probably there is an excellent opportunity in 2020 when the countries have decided that they will pass through a major refinement procedure. So I think this is an interesting thing to cope with and to prepare ourselves as an international community, along with the private sector, along with the big data, along with what we call the data revolution. That is very common now to tell about that. So I think there is an excellent opportunity also to work beyond what is now in the short term the challenge to measure. Moreover, we have the national reporting. The national reporting opens a set of possibilities that is very rich, and we have already seen from Peter's report that there are a lot of possibilities existing sources. Now, from today's, the earlier presentation, we also have the possibility to take big data on board. We have to take very much seriously the different sources from administrative records, from business registries, for surveys, from many sources. So I think it's not only that we are going to deal with the global reporting, but also it will be combined with the national reporting that has already started. The countries are already starting to report on that. The other interesting thing is and I want to emphasize that from the employment perspective, that we have found that this is, of course, jobs are in the center of the people's attention. Politicians, nobody would win an election without focusing on jobs or on how jobs can manage to alleviate poverty. But this is an interesting opportunity, how statisticians have taken it very seriously, beyond the usual suspects of the labor statistics community. Now it goes beyond, and then we have found a lot of partners in this. And this exercise of the SDGs has been very rich, and I think guided also by UN Statistical Division as a secretariat. We, as a system that usually we work in a fragmented way, we have shown along a very, I would say, sound way of coming up very quickly with a framework. It has been quite successful, how to engage the different partners, the different parties in that, and we managed to do it. And I think at the global level, from our perspective, I think employment is not the ILO anymore alone. Now we have UNWTO, we have FIO, we have WHO, we have all the international organizations, plus civil society. We have the different new partners, private sector with all the different sources. And the more importantly, it's the national statistical officers. National statistical officers as the main kind of coordinators of the system in the country, who will really be the catalytic place where a country will have to further report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. And I think you already mentioned one of the important buzzwords, and that's frameworks. I think frameworks are really important because they set the rules, they set the framework, if they're called frameworks, to calculate the indicators or to derive the indicators and have data in a harmonized and standardized way. And I think Carolee Kovacs, who is Chief Statistics of International Trade and Services in the United Nations Statistics Division, will tell us a little bit more about the existing frameworks we have in the tourism sector. And he might probably tell us a little bit how these existing frameworks, or the frameworks to be developed, might help to improve the SDG indicators we will see in future.
Thank you. I try very quickly just to give some information. So as it was said, UN Statistics Division, my office is basically the background supporting the whole process. And Ms. Bersales pointed out how this has been done. And I would like what Rafael said, that the countries were the driving force behind this development, and the national statistical offices were in a representative basis part of the interagency group. So you have had quite a few chances to influence this work. And as it was said, the General Assembly started the whole process and now approved the goals and targets. And our job now to see how this can be done. And I just wanted to focus on tourism statistics, where we do have the supporting frameworks, which could help, the exact calculation or compilation of these indicators. However, I would like to point out that many countries do have problems in the implementation of these frameworks. So in the coming years, we have a challenge how to help the countries to move ahead. And I would like to report that before the conference, we had a workshop with selected countries, mainly from the region, and we had a significant number of local participants where both the National Statistical Office of the Philippines as well as the regional offices were present, and we discussed exactly the issues, how to move forward in the implementation of the TSA. As it has been said, the revision is on its way, and currently we do have 3 indicators, and we're always kind of investigating how much the existing frameworks could support to produce these indicators, and we'll do so as Peter pointed out that the tourism community is much behind this process to support, and the discussion has been started, and Lisa pointed out that this conference is also very, very timely because we're discussing the issues, how to move forward from here and how to help countries to implement this process. So I think the very important thing is that the supporting frameworks are ready to support the calculation of the indicators. And it depends on us, on countries, on international organizations, how fast we move ahead. And I was more than happy hearing about the private sector support and interest in this work. So I think we have together a strong wish to move forward. But would like to call your attention that in a few years, it's your call to provide the data, because we will, again, serving as a secretariat to make an international database on the SDG indicators, including the tourism indicators. But again, depends on the country data availability, the fullness or the completeness of the database will depend on your input. So I would just finish with the thought that please support this project and support Peter's questions, how to move forward to improve the indicators. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karoli. And I think we still have some minutes to pick 1, 2, 3 selected questions from the audience, but I like to remind you that these questions should be related to Peter's document or to other things that just have been said here from the panel.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Lippman. I have a question in relation to, which is probably something that all of the speakers might have a view on, particularly our friend from the private sector. There are a wide variety of goals, of targets and of indicators, and there is an evolving group of private and public and NGO partners who are all making their own definitions of the indicators. And I see our colleague from the UN Statistical system is nodding. There is one indicator, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it, and one goal, which is goal 13, which is climate change, which is seen from the Paris Agreement to be an accelerating, intensifying challenge to our society as a whole. How are you going to factor the indicators and targets for climate resilience into the work that you're doing? Thank you.
Peter, I think that is something related to to the second part of your paper. At least you're not shaking your head.
Well, yes, I have to check. Well, I think this is thank you for the question. It's a crucial question, and climate change sometimes is not, well, it's a long-term issue, of course, the climate change. Well, it's sometimes not very easy to capture this with figures, of course. But with all the figures, which I also mentioned in my paper, I think we can measure also the impacts of the climate change. So this concerns water, for example, the use of water. I think it has something to do, or the availability of water has something to do with climate change. For example, in my country, and I think also in other countries, we feel a little bit the climate change since, for example, the snow. We have a little bit of a problem of snow because the threshold where you have snow and where you don't snow, this is increasing. So in regions below 1,500 meters, we have really problems with snow. And of course, this can be measured very clearly, but also the impacts doing, for example, artificial snow can be measured because, as we know, snowing machines, for example, are using a lot of water. So I think indirectly there are a lot of possibilities to measure climate change. I have a little bit my doubts that again one figure can measure the climate change. So I think it's a combination of different factors.
I saw a lady over there.
May I just, since you were interested in the private sector, I would just address real quick and say that.
Yeah, but very, very brief.
I'm sorry?
Very, very brief.
Yeah. You know, regardless of what our administration might be doing or our president might be saying, I think that you know, there's a high adoption of you know, the concept of the Paris Agreement and the mission of the agreement, and I think that you're seeing a lot of companies start you know, figuring out what their science-based targets are. You know, we've seen a competitor to do some work as an industry. We've done some work around it as well, and as a company, it's something that we're currently calculating is what's our science-based targets to stay in line with the Paris Agreement.
I saw a lady over there had a question. Because she rose her hand. Okay, then.
Should I go or should she go?
She has to move to the microphone.
Could you move the microphone? Could you go to the microphone and then please tell us who you are?
danke。那个我是来自中国，我用中文讲，我们谢谢同团的翻译。
Speaking in Mandarin, thank you, the interpreter. So first of all, I am delighted to participate in the UNWTO's conference, and during the last 3 days, I have learned a great deal. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you, host, for your excellent moderation. And I'd like to talk to you about our research work. According to our research work, I have 2 questions.
Okay, questions.
I have 2 questions.
那个这样子的。
So my research trip, currently we are working on the statistics in the county level in China, because China is a vast country, and yesterday from our CNTA data, they have talked about their national level work. However, in China right now we have 4 levels: national, provincial, city level, and county level. And for our county level, we have 2,800. And above them, we have 300 cities and 30 provinces. So for the county level data collection, this is a local level data collection, and it is a very important job. And at the moment, for different counties, you know, if we don't have a standard, then it's very difficult. And for my team, we are focused on the local level data collection. We have tried to use a lot of big data method. For example, in Hainan province, province in China. This is the most southern island for China. We used the mobile GPS system, and in 2014, October, we have started this system, and so far we have accumulated data of over 2 years. And these 2 years, they are from the BOSS system from the mobile companies, and every 5 minutes they would send us the data. Through the data, in 1 hour, we would be able to see the how many tourists they are coming.
For the question you wanted to raise to the panel.
Well, after we use the data, so we face 2 questions now. The first one is that for the county levels tourism indicators, how do we use them? You know, they are related to the national level, but not quite sometimes. So do you have any good advice? And second question, within our indicator systems, we need to have our accounting and definition. And this accounting system, this is not in line with our current national definition, and you need to use big data, and the big data is actually different from the current definition of the national level. So I wonder if the UN could come up with a standardized definition, because this is simply a trial for us at this stage.
Thank you, and I think we just collect the question, and the man that I've just chosen away from the microphone, please. Very brief.
I will. My question is to you, sir, from the Hilton Worldwide. The question is to you. It's very encouraging to know that the enterprise is very engaged into the sustainable tourism. My very specific question to you is, what, in your opinion, you think is the most appropriate and easy to understand indicator that will engage your customer, not your enterprise? You're doing your right work by data collection and regression analysis and the likes. How do you integrate and how do you encourage the customer that stays in your room to do their job?
That's a good question, and it's one that I think that we haven't really figured out as an industry, to be honest. I think that we do a couple of things we don't do really well. Is number one, share our efforts with our guests. I think that our guests are not necessarily aware of all the great things that the specific hotel where they're staying might be doing. And the other one is, how do we engage the guest in that journey? And that's a tough one, because oftentimes when people are traveling, they want to indulge, right? We see it in our operations. You might be on a diet, but it's easy when you're in the comfort of your hotel room to order that burger right in the room service, or to bypass going to the fitness center. We have a few programs in place. The one that comes to mind is specifically around meetings and events, and that's where we see the highest ask is for people to integrate sustainability or other measures into their meetings. Whether it's in the type of meeting rooms that they select, making sure that there's natural light, whether it's in the food and beverage that's offered throughout the meeting, making sure that it's locally sourced, that it's seasonal, things like that. It's also integrating wellness programs into meetings and events.
Okay.
But to be honest, I don't think that as an industry we've really figured out yet how to best engage the guests in our journey, outside of meetings. Yeah, we're trying things and piloting things. I know some companies, and it was mentioned in one of the quotes in the TripAdvisor presentation. I know some companies allow you to bypass housekeeping, and you get points in return. We're
Max,
looking into different ways to do that.
Thank you for this very detailed answer. I just want to ask Karoli if he wants to give one or two sentences to the lady from China about the role of the United Nations in coordinating the systems. Before I wrap up this session.
I will be very short. So as I said, the methodology is behind to calculate the indicators are there. I shall admit that the regional component, original suggestions are a little bit slower, but both the UNWTO Statistical Committee as well as my office are working on the sub-regional measure issues, and hopefully we would come up with a framework. So at the moment, the MST is being developed as well as the TSA compilation guide, both of them gonna to get the sub-regional aspect. Thank you.
Many thanks for this quick answer. And I'd like just to shortly wrap up the session. I think we've learned a lot. We've learned about the SDG process, and we've seen that we have an initial framework here, not only for tourism indicators, but for all indicators measuring all SDGs, and that tourism is not only included in these 2 or 3 targets that explicitly mention tourism, but in many, many other aspects. And we now have the chance to develop these set of indicators during the next years. We have a revision round for the year 2020 and another one for 2025. And we, as the ones who are in charge of the indicators, need your input as the community of tourism experts to help us to develop the right indicators to measure sustainable tourism. Thank you. And I'd like to thank my brilliant panel.
Thank you so much to our moderator and for those very insightful presentations. We now make way for our closing ceremonies in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our closing ceremonies will begin in less than 5 minutes. And for those who will be joining the Intramuros tour today, the time of departure has been moved from 2:40 to 2:15 p.m. Assembly time is at 2 p.m. at the lobby of Marriott Grand Ballroom. This is to give time for those who would like to go shopping. Please don't forget to bring your badges. And for ease of transport, please accomplish the departure slips and make sure you submit it to the registration area. For delegates requiring a certificate of attendance, kindly claim it at the registration desk at 12:45 p.m. You may also claim flash drives containing all the conference presentations at the registration desk after the program. Presentations are also available online at www.mstconference.org. Use our official hashtag, IY2017. And we would like to inform the UNSD participants that the assembly time for the technical visit at the Philippine Statistics Authority today has been moved from 2:30 to 2 p.m. Assembly area is at the lobby of the Marriott Grand Ballroom. Please don't forget to bring your badges. We are requesting our panelists for our closing ceremonies to please proceed to the stage area. Members of the panel for our closing ceremonies, please join us right now at the stage area. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats. Our closing ceremonies will begin in just a very short while. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we approach our last session, we hope the past 2 days have been fruitful and memorable. Now, for our closing ceremony, may we invite our rapporteur, Mr. Tadayuki Hara, Associate Professor at the University of Central Florida, to present us the conference highlights.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I know we are a little bit behind, so I'll try my best to fit myself within 15 minutes, even though the slide has 27 pages. Okay, opening ceremony. Oh, by the way, in order to save time, I will not necessarily read what's written. I'll just mention about it. So these are the things which were mentioned, clear and consistent messages that tourism is growing globally and vital to the Philippines. We're a tribe of travelers. Tourism can be an essential contributor to broader sustainable development. Measuring tourism impact is essential for policy and informed decisions. Statisticians must seek to build trust. I think this word came up several times. Second one was the ministerial roundtable. Tourism can contribute to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and drive win-win outcomes at community levels. This, at the level, this will be important, often mentioned. Credible, clear, consistent measurement and indicators are essential. A common language must underpin, I guess I can walk around. Common language must underpin joint progress between statisticians and policymakers. Working toward MSD is necessary. Strong support from ministers for the development of MSD is very important because several times it was mentioned, inter-institutional collaboration is important, but usually you need a certain kind of leadership from the higher authorities. Okay, Chief Statisticians Roundtable. SDGs are very explicit call for integrated policies across economies, society, and environment. These three names also quite often mentioned. So economy, society, and environment. And this framework will
try to give a common language, because sometimes the language is used in different, three parties are different. So this one try to find the common languages. Again, integrating economic, social, and environmental dimensions. Again, this idea came, so three different groups, and we have to satisfy all of them. Again, the word trust, I put a little bit of different colors. This word came several times when I observed the 3 days conference. Okay, so you have seen something like this. Basically, in 2020, present the UN Statistical Commission a framework for measuring sustainable tourism. So we have certain time frames. Strategy is first, define where you are. Then second, decide where you want to go. And third, you have time frame. That's a strategy. So 2020 is an important time. There are some pilot studies, and some of them, as you have seen in this conference, have a very encouraging result, such as Austria, Italy, Fiji, Mexico, New Zealand, UK, Philippines. Okay. We had a lot of sessions, and I tried to cover all the summaries, but I'll go quickly because of the time pressures. So first session, understanding data needs and uses, importance of communicating data, adapting to different needs of stakeholders, and all these things are mentioned. Common ground for communities, municipalities, and counties is different needs and indicators. This was also mentioned several times by different presenters. Session 2, economy and environment, linking those. So TSA and SEEA, we have two different systems, and I will mention about this later because so many people mentioned about this relationship between the two. Current focus on environmental flows, but people mentioned that you have to really think environment as an asset. That's another viewpoint. Oh. Is it working? It says no signal. Uh-oh, this must be a challenge. That somebody is asking my short-term memory and I don't have printout. So does it come out? Well, while they are working, maybe I'll speak something. Quite often, I sometimes stay in that fish tank to be a simultaneous translator. Yes, that's why I know that these people have to listen to the conference very carefully. But it was not until I took the role of rapporteur that I also have to listen to the conference very carefully because I have to speak later about it. Coming back? Okay, fine. To save time, I'll just try my best. So basically, session 2, we talked about the importance of linking TSA and SEEA. And this was mentioned later because, a little bit technical, but the TSA is a demand, driven, whereas SEEA is more of a production side approach. It's a little bit different approach. But when you really try to identify the tourism share of, certain production output, you need indicators such as tourism ratios, which is used in the TSA. So those are the things we talked. Okay, thank you. Also, we're coming back. Excellent. Yeah, very good. Okay, next one. Next one. Yep, that's good. Yeah, go ahead. Push. Oh, it doesn't go any further? Okay, fine. Third session, employment, a key aspect of social dimension of sustainable tourism. ILO was taking a leadership in this. And of course, labor or employment-related data are very important in the regional levels, and quite often this is a very important indicators for policymakers, whereas many other stakeholders are more interested in economic activities, but I know employment is very important. Oh, coming back, excellent. Okay, so the session 3 was that one, yes. That was a nice photo, isn't it? So there was a central paper mentioned about green jobs, and then there were several discussions. It's only a summary, different people, China, Costa Rica, Wales, Belgium, and the Eurostat. Because of the time, I will not read it. Okay. Now, the fourth session, sub-national measurement in the Philippines. Oh, no, wait a moment. No, understanding needs and putting data to use. Okay. So this was building trust, again, is very important. And again, this was mentioned several times. We have to have an indicator which is easy to use so that, constituent or stakeholders will buy in the concept. So that was mentioned several times. And also, institutional capacity building was mentioned. Quite often, central authority have a very good idea, but if you want to implement that in the regional or local levels, you really need to invest into development of human resources. So that's mentioned here. Okay, and linking economic and environmental measurement. Oh, sorry. Okay, we talked about that. Next one. Employment. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, back to subnational measurement in the Philippines. So there were several presentations, and these are some of the highlights mentioned in those presentations. That one is followed by subnational measurement in the world. So there are several cases of the world. And there were certain issues. For example, seasonal population changes. What to do with that? And there was a very interesting case of France was presented, UNWTO was presented, and there are several cases. I think a web-based system compiles the TSA accounts efficiently. It was presented by the presenter from China. And spatial areas. This is also mentioned several times during this conference. Okay, so we had 10, now coming back to 9. So producing data on sustainable tourism. Oh, by the way, up to the second day, of course, I can afford. I was able to let UNWTO people look at it and gave me some advice. From here, it's from this morning. It's completely unedited. So anything wrong, it's 100% my fault. So 7S, volume, velocity, variety, validity, volatility, value. That was interesting. There were several presentations, and what I noticed is while many of the people, when they hear the word big data, they are thinking about the collection side of collecting big data, whereas I think the one from Japan and the others, and also I do also think to see the different side, which is how to analyze huge data, which is beyond humans' cognitive abilities. So it's more like a methodology. So there's a data collection side approach and also data analysis side. Both are talking or using the word big data. That's what I know about. Okay. So this one, just before my coming here, there was a discussion. A central paper talked about several indicators which definitely were interesting to all of us. And there were some discussions, Philippines, Hilton, ILO, UN Statistical Division. So that has been the summary of the 10 sessions and the ministerial roundtable and so on. Okay. Now, this is an overview. I think this is only one page, what I felt. I felt that basically observing the conference, majority definitely support for and agree to the need of a measurement of sustainable tourism. I mean, it's almost unanimous. It was confirmed at the ministerial level. This means that it is very conducive to endorsement of Manila Call for Action, which is nice. Utilization of the existing statistical data, TSA or System of National Accounts, would alleviate challenges to integrate these things with SEA. So one of the messages which came or implicated was, okay, even though you will do new things, try to utilize the existing resources, which will make your work a little bit easier. And of course, not all 17 goals are not implementable, but of course, you pick up certain things and doable ones, and that will be a good, way to go forward. So you don't have to deal with all of them at the same time, I guess. And again, I mentioned about it, but TSA has been very unique because TSA is demand-driven. You get the data of the final consumers and build it up, whereas other systems are more of a production side driven. So that is a very interesting part. Okay, last two slides, very quick. Anybody in the academic field, we just did a little bit of experimental stuff. So these are the research, academic areas researches. And of course, there are a lot of keywords, and there's the sustainable tourism stuff. It's the pink one on the right side. But what I thought was, okay, so what kind of research topics are in fashion in academic research areas? And if you look at, tables on the right side, I think the x-axis, the share of publications, y-axis is the growth of such publication in certain each areas. And you can clearly see that sustainable tourism is on the upper side, a big red, which means the current market share of the research is rather small, but the growth rate is very high. That's why this sustainable tourism, this topic, is a hot topic. Last. Okay, very good, 15 minutes. Thank you, Manila. Thank you, Philippines. And, of course, we have to appreciate the sponsors, Department of Tourism of the Philippines, UNWTO, United Nations, various agencies. But also, because I took a PhD in hotel management, I pay attention to other people. A lot of hotel workers worked hard, also people who are on the floor, and also translators, because I often sometimes do that. It's very tough work. And also the stenographers. Yeah, stenographers, you're doing very well. And thank you very much, and that is all.
Thank you, Mr. Hara. And now we shall proceed to adoption of the Manila Call for Action on measuring sustainable tourism. May we call on Mr. Marcio Favela, Executive Director for Operational Programs and Institutional Relations, UNWTO.
Good morning. Good morning. In Spain, good morning is until the moment you have lunch. I know that here in the Philippines and also in my home country, good morning is until 12 o'clock. But in Spain, it's not a time, it's an ocean. So, dear friends, allow me to start by expressing my deepest appreciation to the government of the Philippines for hosting with such grandeur, graciousness, and generosity, once again, a milestone event for us at UNWTO and for the whole international tourism community, the 6th International Conference on Tourism Statistics, Measuring Sustainable Tourism. Back in 1980, Manila hosted the World Tourism Conference, which adopted the landmark Manila Declaration on World Tourism, a declaration that took into account with remarkable foresight almost all aspects of what was then a barely visible phenomenon, that of tourism, and laid the grounds for a better understanding of our sector and inspired and guided policy design and implementation for the following many years. The leadership and vision of the Filipinos, not new to us, brought us back to Manila 37 years later in 2017, and over the past 3 days, when we have discussed, shared, and strengthened our common vision that sustainable tourism, if well managed, can indeed contribute to the meaningful implementation of the 2030 Global Development Agenda and the achievement of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In that regard, the steps taken here become even more important. As we have been repeatedly reminded, we have to measure in order to manage. The presentations and contributions over these 3 days have covered a very wide breadth of topics, an evidence of the far-reaching transformative power of tourism and of the interconnected world in which we live. The active discussions and networking have been effective and enlightening, and these personal connections made here in Manila will serve as an excellent foundation for taking this important work forward. Dear friends, in 2017, we celebrate the International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development, as adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. The International Year 2017 aims to build capacity, raise awareness, foster knowledge, and enhance effectiveness of tourism's role in 5 critical areas of sustainable development. 1, inclusive and sustainable economic growth. 2, social inclusiveness, employment and poverty reduction. 3, resource efficiency, environment protection, and climate change. 4, cultural values, diversity, and heritage. 5, mutual understanding, peace, and security. This international conference on tourism statistics is, with all merits, part of the calendar of the official events of the International Year. And most importantly, this conference brings in substantive contributions to our celebrations and projects these discussions much beyond 2017. The Measuring Sustainable Tourism Initiative, which has received full support of the United Nations Statistics Commission, is geared towards shaping and sharing a common understanding of how to measure the economic, environmental, and social aspects of tourism across relevant spatial scales, global, national, and subnational levels, while incorporating the possibilities opened by technological advancements and continuing to advocate for the sustainability principles of our sector. As accurately reflected in the Manila Call for Action, which we hope we can adopt shortly, this milestone initiative will benefit other sectors as well, given tourism's cross-cutting nature, and is based on the knowledge that an integrated, coherent, and robust information base is needed to support concrete analysis so as to adequately inform and strengthen public and private decision-making processes. But as a collective endeavor, this Measuring Sustainable Tourism framework requires your commitment, support, and leadership. This is a call to all of you and other partners and stakeholders to continue to move forward together in the coming years. In that regard, I hope that, and I'm very confident that the Department of Tourism and the Philippine Statistics Authority can carry out a pilot implementation of the Measuring Sustainable Tourism framework. And I anticipate my gratefulness and thankfulness to the two representatives here, Ms. Lisa Bersales and Mr. Benito Benson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Dear friends, I'm honored to invite all of you to adopt the Manila Call for Action on Measuring Sustainable Tourism. This most important document is not legally binding, but the collective vision, strength, and commitment that we need to move forward is there. It was originally prepared by UNWTO, the Department of Tourism, and the Philippine Statistics Authority, and widely circulated to international stakeholders and the conference participants whose many suggestions and contributions have enriched the document. You have received by email this morning the latest version. As we have received additional and important contributions this morning, which I believe are worth still incorporating and doing some final fine-tuning, I hope you can entrust UNWTO and the Philippine government to incorporate this fine-tuning, these suggestions into the document, and we will circulate the very final version to you again in the coming days. But in the meantime, I would like to invite Ms. Lisa Bersales and Mr. Benito Benson to the stage so that we can receive the adoption of the document. Thank you very much for adopting this very important document, a call for action on measuring sustainable tourism. I would like to inform you also that the Manila Call for Action, this document, will be presented by Secretary Wanda Teo at the UNWTO General Assembly that will take place in Chengdu, China, next September. It will also be an important contribution for the discussions of the conference on jobs and inclusive growth, partnerships for sustainable development, another official event of the International Year 2017, co-organized by UNWTO, the Government of Jamaica, and the World Bank Group next November, to which I invite you all to attend. I'm convinced that the Manila Call for Action will substantially contribute to the sustainable growth of our sector worldwide, and most importantly, help address the common challenge and policy imperatives of poverty eradication and climate change, among other issues important for all international community set forth in the 2030 Global Development Agenda to the benefit of the people and our planet. Dear friends, I would like to conclude by thanking again the government of the Philippines, thanking for all the support and generosity in which they have made us feel what we feel now. Feel so good about being here, working here, being with each other and meeting the Filipinos here. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank Ms. Lisa Bernales, head of the Philippines Statistics Authority, a great partner of UNWTO for the last 2 years and for the years to come. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank the Secretary of Tourism of the Philippines, Ms. Wanda Tel, here represented by Mr. Benito Benson Jr., Undersecretary for Tourism Development Planning. Of course, I have the pleasure of thanking our panelists and moderators who have done their best in preparing, delivering, and sharing their knowledge and views. Thank you very much, and please a round of applause to them. What we see now, what we see today is not usual. In the last day, in the final moments of the conference, we have the conference room full. We've had 973 participants. This is a number for a General Assembly, not for a conference. And these participants have come from 87 countries besides the Philippines, 88 countries. This is an unprecedented number. Congratulations and thank you very much. As this is an official event of the International Year 2017, I also want to thank all official sponsors and partners. You will see the video of the International Year shortly after we finish. Mr. Jara mentioned before, but I would also like to thank the interpreters who have been doing their best and their excellent work to follow all that has been said here and making sure that everything is precisely translated. Thank you very much. I'm sure you will agree with me that we ought to deliver a very, very special word of thanks to all young men and women, the young Filipinos that have hosted so graciously with efficiency and a generous smile from morning to the evening. They've been there every day, every day. Thank you very much. So the work may be over after this session, but the fun in the Philippines is not over. It continues. So I hope you can enjoy the incredible program that our hosts have prepared, have put together for all of us this afternoon and tomorrow. So you have been good tourists in these last 3 days, but I hope you are even more good tourists, better tourists when visiting Manila this afternoon, going to the technical visit tomorrow, spending some money and getting to know the local culture, interacting with the local communities and getting to know the Philippines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bengzon, Dr. Borsales, and Mr. Favela. And thank you to all the sponsors of the International Year on Sustainable Tourism for Development 2017. Please watch this.
I believe sustainable tourism contributes directly to the job creation all over the world.
We have a common challenge and a common responsibility, and that is to build a more sustainable future for our industry.
El Año Internacional de Turismo Sostenible refuerza nuestra voluntad y nos invita a continuar en el camino para conseguir un mundo más equilibrado.
El Año Internacional del Turismo supone un reto importantísimo, es pasar de las palabras a los hechos. Y generar este cambio a nivel global es algo que debemos hacer entre todos y de manera colaborativa.
And this is the only way we can change the scale, making sustainable tourism a real and integrated approach and not only a niche activity.
As an emirate that is growing, upcoming, and on its way to define its future, Ras Al Khaimah has accomplished great achievements to date. However, we still have a lot more to aspire to, and we owe to our people and our emirate to ensure that we continue to drive sustainable tourism.
We believe IY 2017 will not only create a lasting positive impact on the world, but also demonstrate the collective resolve of the industry.
We're pleased to join the UNWTO and its partners to communicate the benefits of sustainable travel for the communities where we work and live. At Hilton, our mission is to be the most hospitable company in the world, and as such, we believe we can use our passion for hospitality to have a positive impact on people's lives, on the environment, and our communities.
That concludes our 6th session. Just a few reminders for our technical tour to the walled city of Intramuros. Please remember that the tour is open to all foreign and local delegates. And please keep in mind the schedule. For those who will be joining the Intramuros tour today, the time of departure has been moved later on.
Let me compliment the work of our good master of ceremonies and invite Mr. Benito Benson for his intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Favela, for the intervention. I will keep this short because I know that the only thing keeping you guys from lunch is my speech. But distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the culmination of the 6th UNWTO International Conference on Tourism Statistics. On behalf of Tourism Secretary Wanda Teo, I would like to express our sincerest thanks to all the delegates for the active participation, the sustained interest over the past 2.5 days. We hope that you found all the sessions interesting, substantive, and relevant. And if you haven't done so, I hope that you will find time to check out the sites of Metro Manila, do some shopping, help the economy a little bit. We would also like to convey our sincerest appreciation to a most valued and ever-reliable partner, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, for co-organizing this with the DOT. this event that has been truly remarkable. Our heartfelt thanks goes to the driving force between the organization, the Secretary General, Dr. Taleb Rifai, and I'd like to thank the entire team from the UNWTO for an excellent job in partnership with our own team from the Philippine Department of Tourism. We all aim to develop and push for a more sustainable tourism industry, one that contributes to economic and inclusive growth, one that advances our social agenda, and more importantly, one that protects our natural assets. We all aspire for an industry that concerns itself not only with counting heads or counting visitors, but also with creating employment opportunities and helping build communities. For sure, there will be challenges along the way, but through closer cooperation, we will find collective solutions. Through this international conference, we have heard from experts from multiple disciplines. We've heard their thoughts, their suggestions on how to develop and utilize a statistical framework for measuring sustainable tourism. We have learned how to design, implement the necessary database at the global, national, and subnational levels as we pursue a more evidence-based approach in policy and decision-making. We at the DOT have also developed our own roadmap, the National Tourism Development Plan, which is anchored on two strategic directions: improving the competitiveness of the country, and more importantly, ensuring that tourism remains inclusive and sustainable. I also take this opportunity to express our appreciation, our delight to collaborate with the Philippine Statistics System and the UNWTO to be part of pilot countries for the MST. We are optimistic that with the UN Declaration of 2017 as the International Year of Sustainable Development, we can muster more support for our sustainable tourism development initiatives. Through a more holistic and integrated approach, we can move closer towards our shared goal of economic growth, social inclusiveness, resource efficiency, environmental protection, and mutual understanding. Let me close by urging one and all to refresh ourselves with a simple concept presented in the School of Development, that to be sustainable is to be balanced, and to be balanced is to mutually gain without compromising the future, our common future. To all the conference delegates, the speakers, the moderators, the sponsors, once again, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your active participation. To our foreign friends, enjoy the rest of your stay here in the Philippines. Have fun and have a safe flight back to your homes. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.
Thank you, Mr. Bengzon. And that concludes our event today. We encourage everyone to attend our farewell dinner at the Marriott Grand Ballroom in just a little while.
That almost concludes our event today. We have to listen to our fine friend and head of Philippine Statistical Authority, Ms. Lisa Bersales.
Thank you very much. My statement would be very short. I would just like to echo our appreciation to the UNWTO for, being a great co-organizer with the government of the Philippines. I would like to say that this document, I embrace with my heart. This seems so technical, measuring sustainable tourism, but this represents the lives of the peoples of this planet. And we in this hall will greatly give positive impact when we are able to actualize this. So I give, as National Statistician of the Philippines, the commitment of the Philippine Statistical System to collaborate and be pilot for this statistical framework for measuring sustainable tourism. Thank you very much and good morning.
Thank you once again, Mr. Bengzon, Dr. Bersales, and Mr. Favela. Don't forget, at 6:30, you are encouraged to attend our farewell dinner at the Marriott Grand Ballroom A. And please remember to leave the SI equipment on your tables. We may now proceed with our luncheon at the Marriott Grand Ballroom D. Once again, for those who will be joining the Intramuros tour today, the time of departure has been moved from 2:40 to 2:15 p.m. Assembly time is at 2 p.m. at the lobby of Marriott Grand Ballroom. This is to give time for those who would like to go shopping. And please don't forget to bring your badges. Also, a reminder to inform our UNSD participants that the assembly time for the technical visit at the Philippine Statistics Authority today has been moved as well from 2:30 p.m. to 2 p.m. Assembly area is at the lobby of the Marriott Grand Ballroom. Please bring your badges as well. And for ease of transport, please accomplish the departure slips and make sure you submit it at the registration area. For delegates requiring a certificate of attendance, kindly claim them at the registration desk at 12:45. You may also claim flash drives with all the conference presentations at the registration desk after the lunch hour. Presentations are also available online at www.mstconference.org. Please use our official hashtag IY2017. That's official hashtag IY2017.